and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzel.
Take the Field's mission is to inform baseball players that physical activity is nothing to be scared of, that a little bit of running can be fun.
Now, Rebecca, this obesity problem is nothing new.
Well, right. There is a culture of obesity in baseball that has been around for years. I mean, coaches even sub in healthy pinch runners instead of encouraging their overweight players to hustle, depriving them of the only cardiovascular exercise they might have a chance to get.
And a lot of these athletes have been playing baseball since they were kids.
Well, right. So they might have never learned any healthy habits.
Baseball is fine in moderation, but many of these men spend over 200 days a year playing it, and that adds up.
The program encourages players once an hour to take a 15-minute break from baseball to do something active, like go up and down some stairs, go for a walk, or play some basketball.
All right, well, thanks, Rebecca. If you're a baseball coach and you're worried about your players' health, go to takethefield.gov for a list of healthy activities and nutritious snacks. Coming up next, does America brains get worse hearing words correct?
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever is on your mind. 603-283-6160 if you would like to do that. Again, that phone number is 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Arya.
It's Ian.
And of course, the craziest news that I've seen today is probably the ex-Baywatch actress. We can't play the video because she's pretty vulgar, but she evidently got a bit upset about some 80-year-old man not wearing a mask, and she then flipped out. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's also a video that we can play where a pharmacist straight up admits that he feels I think he says incompetent as a pharmacist toward the very end of the video before it cuts out. But it's because a lady just asked him some questions about the vaccine that they wanted to give her. And it's really interesting. She ends up being given a piece of paper that's, glued together like they're supposed to be. And as they unfold it, what they learn is that it just says this page intentionally left blank throughout the entire document. And of course, I did actually go home last night and watch the new Matrix movie, Matrix Resurrections. I had originally no intention of watching this until you and Bonnie suggested I do so, because it's called Resurrections. And I've seen enough movies and played enough video games to know that anything with the word Resurrections in the title,
Usually terrible.
yeah, it's usually just absolute awful cash grab. And this was that. But it was done so brilliantly that I loved everything about the movie. And we're going to talk about that later. But first, I want to talk about this crazy lady, evidently a former Playboy model. And again, we can't play the video, but you can find it very easy. She was on a Delta Airlines flight, and she has now gone viral because she's been nicknamed Delta Karen, because there's a video of her screaming at another passenger, spitting on him, and slapping him for not wearing his mask. Now, even if I could play the video, you wouldn't be able to see it, but by far the most remarkable thing about this video is that she's standing up in the airplane, yelling at this dude with her face mask she's not wearing. It's pulled down, it's a chin strap for her. And
Right.
she's berating this old guy, physically assaulting this old guy for not wearing a mask, while she's also not wearing one. The video has now been seen by nearly 10 million people. And the identity of Karen is now known as Patricia Cornwall. She's an actress. Probably won't be an actress for much longer. One-time cheerleader for the Oakland Raiders. And she's been on both Baywatch and Married with Children. And apparently posed in Playboy. She was in the airplane aisle, briefly blocked by the beverage service on the flight, and was instructed to take a seat until the cart passed by. So she was already not being a particularly good airline passenger. The lady, she said, now this is quoting, let's see, who is this? Mark Cox, evidently. He was on the flight. I don't know. He says, the lady, she said to them, "I'm not kidding you. According to court documents, what am I? Rosa Parks," when she was asked to take a seat so that the drink cart could be brought past her. Cornwall was arrested by the police Because, of course, she was. When you do stuff like this on a flight, there's nowhere you can go. They're going to find you, and they're going to arrest you. She was taken into custody by the FBI because doing this sort of thing on a flight, it is a federal charge. Federal felonies apply. She posted a $20,000 bail and is allowed only to fly back home to Los Angeles, which is amazing to me that they let this woman back on a flight after this was how she was behaving on the other one.
And have you seen the whole clip of her going at this guy?
I have not. I've clipped around it. I clicked around it a little bit, but I did not watch the entire thing. And the one I did watch, I didn't have audio turned on because I knew it wasn't usable for the show.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. She is just lambasting this old dude who's sitting in his seat,
minding his own business.
He doesn't have a mask on because he says he's having a drink. Because that's, the rules apparently on the flight is you can take the mask down to put food or drink in your mouth, and that's what he says he was doing, and he tries to explain that to her. And to be fair, he does call her Karen at one point.
She's acting like a Karen, so...
And it's pretty funny. I didn't realize he was 80 years old. Is that how old he was? Did you say 80 years old?
80 years old, according to this article.
Wow.
So she assaulted an old man.
Yeah, and she just can't just move on. He's like, look, go sit down, move on, Karen. And she just can't let it go. She has to make a stand and shout at this man and make a scene.
Like literally making a stand. She is standing up in the airplane with her mask off, turned around, yelling at this man behind her.
Yeah, and the funny part, funny, it's sick, but the sick part of this is she pretends to be this person who's so concerned.
Well, it's to protect the 80-year-olds from getting sick.
Right, and then she proceeds to spit on this dude. As she's attacking him, she also spits on him. So, you obviously aren't concerned for his health.
Well, she physically assaults him, too, so it's hard to say she is.
No, right, but it's the whole idea of you're spitting on somebody, yet you're pretending like masks are important to you?
That's a good point. Cause
ridiculous.
The whole idea behind the mask is that they're going to catch, people's spit particles as they speak and stuff like that. But when this person wants to yell, she just takes her mask down anyway, so it's not catching anything.
Yeah.
And spitting on someone is substantially worse than spitting on them as you speak. I saw something similar in Home Depot today when someone asked me a question from 50 feet away or whatever. The girl pulled down her mask in order to... What is the point of this? What is the point of wearing your mask if you constantly have to touch it to bring it down so you can speak? Incidentally, though, yet another place that I can go without being asked to wear a mask. They have a sign on the door, but it probably
Home Depot does?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But it's probably been there for a year now.
Right.
And I doubt that it's a very new one. But even then, the only changes I've really noticed is that now employees everywhere seem to be wearing masks. But spitting on people is not going to get us out of this pandemic. Hopefully she at least used hand sanitizer before she slapped the guy. It doesn't look like she did because they keep the hand sanitizer by the front and by the bathrooms, essentially. And she's too busy yelling at this guy in order to actually, think about the pandemic that we're in, which motivated this entire behavior. And that's what's remarkable about this, is as you began to point out, this whole thing is about caring for one another. It's about keeping each other safe. I'm supposed to get vaccinated because I care about that 80-year-old passenger. And that's the reason she's supposed to get vaccinated, because she's not at risk of dying from COVID-19. I'm not at risk of dying from COVID-19, but that 80-year-old got a higher than zero chance of dying from it, higher than I do at the very least.
Yeah. Still, most of them are going to survive it. Unless they're, obese, or, of course, if you're obese, you probably don't make it to 80, or you have some other kind of,
underlying condition, yeah. That's in stark contrast to what China is doing, though, and there's not enough talk about China and how they're handling the lockdowns and the pandemic and all of that, I think, because China is one of these totalitarian regimes like North Korea. I'm also curious to know how North Korea is handling the pandemic.
They're not saying.
No, of course not. But China is, and they have what is being described as a brutal zero COVID lockdown, similar to New Zealand and Australia, where they're like, no, we have to get cases down to zero. And China is authoritarian and totalitarian enough where they would just do that, right? They would just lock down the entire country and not allow people to actually live, exercising no rights or freedoms whatsoever. Well, now in China, in certain parts of China, they've announced that anyone seen driving will be jailed sent to jail. And this is after 160 new COVID cases were reported in one province. The brutal new lockdown rules come as part of the country's attempt to be COVID-free in the midst of its worst outbreak since the pandemic began. Local news reports hinted that the reason behind the new rules could be down to the fact that the Winter Olympics, which are being held there in February, is under threat if cases continue to rise. Despite no cases of the new Omicron variant being reported, the Communist Party said vehicles would only be allowed on the roads if they were assisting with disease control work.
Wow.
It's actually worse than that in this place. It's not just you can't drive for whatever reason. You also can't leave the house, except and only one person in your household can leave the house.
To go get food?
And that's only every 3 days.
Wow.
To go out and get necessities. So it could be worse because we could be in China, but it could also be a lot better because we could be free. What are your thoughts on all of this? Can China actually lock down their way out of the pandemic? 603-283-6160.
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I'm going to say no as well. There's more coming up here. It's Free Talk Live.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
When a lunar observatory detects a radio broadcast originating from Proxima Centauri, the nations of Earth discover their first contact with an alien race may also be their last. With the Proximans facing an extinction-level disaster, Earth must choose between sending a ship on a multi-year journey or allowing nature to take its course. Saving Proxima, a hard science fiction thriller by Travis S. Taylor and Les Johnson from BaneBooks.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealestate.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you're helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
This is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends. I've run websites since 1996 and have used over a dozen web hosts in that time. AgristHosting.com is the only one that hasn't broken my heart. Agrist Hosting's uptime and service is stellar, and their DDoS mitigation is the best I've seen. That's important because if you tell the truth in this world, you'll ruffle feathers. And some people will try dirty tricks to silence your voice. No matter what the haters hit us with, Agrist Hosting keeps our websites online. If you have a mission-critical commercial presence or a world-changing activism site, you cannot tolerate any skullduggery. So go with AgristHosting.com. Have a WordPress or blog site, but you're not satisfied with performance or uptime? Or just want raw hosting? Want to pay with Bitcoin? Agrist Hosting specializes in high-performance hosting with personalized service. Go to AgristHosting.com and click on the button that says Get Hosted. That's AgristHosting.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160 if you'd like to call in, share your thoughts and opinions, take control of the airwaves, and talk about whatever is important to you. That's 603-283-6160. And we've been telling you about how Intercoin can help any business and organization launch their own currency or raise money using their own token. Well, Intercoin has finally launched its investor token, and it's available on 2 exchanges. You can find links to those at intercoin.org. That's intercoin.org. The easiest to use is probably xmarkets.com. All you need for them is an email address to sign up. You can then deposit dozens of different cryptocurrencies, trade them for Tether, and then use that Tether to buy ITR, which is the Intercoin investor token. Find out more about the Intercoin vision at intercoin.org. That's intercoin.org. And you just might be advancing the cause of liberty around the world. Now, Ian, you actually brought in this video from someone on Twitter who it's sort of difficult to set up. So this lady, the potential customer, is presumably looking to get one of the COVID-19 vaccines. And she, quite understandably, has some questions for the pharmacist. And it's kind of alarming how incapable of answering these questions he actually is. And it actually bothers him how incapable he is. So let's go to that video.
That's from the Moderna vaccine.
Okay, Moderna. Is it the same for Pfizer and all of the others?
Each brand is a little different.
So for those who obviously aren't watching the video, he literally walks up to her. Clearly, she's already asked the first few questions, and he hands her some sort of folded up sheet of paper, the pamphlet for the vaccines, the one that has all of that information about testing and safety and all of that crap that they include when you pick up a prescription, and most people just throw into the trash.
Yeah.
Okay, so may I take this with me to look at all of the safety studies, placebo safety studies on this?
Because the one that we give, because the one that's given to patients doesn't contain that information. So that.
Which one are they giving?
Yeah, this is very confusing. Apparently, he's suggesting that pharmacists are given different information about the vaccines than customers are getting. I've never heard of that. I guess it could be a thing.
Maybe it's true. I have no idea. I mean, he's an expert, so.
It's not this one.
So no, that's the one. That is the one we are giving.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the package insert given to patients isn't the full information.
So it's not from the manufacturer themselves.
That is from the manufacturer, but it's truncated. That's the full thing.
So
if he seems a bit flustered, I suspect it's because he's being recorded.
Does he know, do you think?
I don't know if he does or not, because she is kind of holding the camera not eye level, right? I mean, there's a way, if you want to record someone subtly, you can sort of do it. And if you want to make it known they're being recorded, you can also do it.
Right.
He could also just be flustered because he's being asked questions that he wasn't prepared to answer, and now he's like, oh no, I have to actually be able to answer these questions.
So why is it intentionally blank if it's all the safety studies and stuff?
They're inside.
So she's opened it up, or it says on the outside of it, presumably, because she hasn't opened it up yet.
I think she already knows. She says in the video that she's already aware that this is blank. So I think she's going to pharmacies and doing this purposefully to see, to try to wake these pharmacists up.
That's a good idea.
They're inside of it?
So the guy opens it up.
Folds up.
Okay.
He's opening it with the intention of showing her, oh, look, here's all this information, all these studies.
It supposedly folds out.
And it's just this page intentionally left blank.
Sheet. It's like it's a folded one sheet, huge sheet of paper that's completely blank with intentionally blank written in the middle of it.
He then walks away.
And find it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I already know that it's.
She says, I already know that it's blank. So what's the next thing she's going to say?
And I mean, he's understandably frustrated at this point and confused, and he doesn't know how to handle the situation at this point.
Right, yeah. He's been caught. He's not lying. He has never looked at this, right? Like, he's been told, okay, this is all the information for the pharmacist. Here, lady, I'm going to give it to you. I'm trying to help the customer is what he's trying to do. He's genuinely a good person.
It's intentionally blank. My last question is, how is it informed consent when all of the safety studies, placebo safety studies, are not listed from the manufacturer?
That's a great question. Mm-hmm. I would talk to CVS about that because.
Okay.
First line of defense, always call the corporate office and talk to them. They'll be glad to help you out here.
He has no answer, and that's what she's clearly doing here. She says she knows that it's intentional. She's aware that it's intentionally blank, and then she has that question for him, and he cannot answer it. And honestly, because she's right.
So if we don't know what we're injecting into ourselves, I don't understand how that's informed consent.
That you're exactly right.
Okay.
And you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And you are correct. I should not be giving these vaccines at all.
Okay. Oh.
That's a strong statement from a pharmacist.
Yeah.
Why are you giving them?
Because I am told to, and that's how. Because I am told to, and I am told.
I understand that.
And everything I have shown, including the patients that I have given it to, it is safe.
It is safe and effective.
So it's interesting the things that he's saying here, right? Like, he's saying on one hand, I shouldn't be giving these vaccines out. I mean, my patients can't possibly have informed consent, so therefore I shouldn't be giving it. Why are you doing it? Well, I'm told to, and the thing he doesn't want to say is, I don't want to lose my job. I mean, that's what he's saying, right? Like, this is part of his job is to do this, is to inject people with this vaccine, which is not, information is not available like he thought that it was, but he still doesn't want to lose his job. So talk to the corporate office. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed. That's basically this video, and it's wild.
It is sad, man, that this person could be beaten to that degree, because you're right. There is a lot of cognitive dissonance here where he's like, I shouldn't be giving people this vaccine, but he's going to go on now to justify the reasons he's been giving away this vaccine. Well, none of the people I've given it to have died, or I don't remember exactly what he says, but he
says it's safe. That looks like it's safe.
It's fine in his experience of dealing with people and giving it to them.
You're going by that states that it's safe and effective. I know these are tough questions, but I have to ask.
I know, and I'm sorry that.
But you can't answer. So I understand that.
I unfortunately cannot answer that,
okay.
And I feel it. And right now I'm feeling totally inadequate
as a pharmacist. Presumably is what he was about to say.
That's where it cuts off.
It does cut off there, sadly. I'd like to see the rest of the video, or how it got to this point. But presumably she wasn't recording by then. But I don't know if she's going to different pharmacies to do this and try to get the pharmacist there to.
That's just my presumption.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where videos get shared around and you never really can find the original source of it.
True.
So who knows who this lady is, what her deal is. But the fact that she already knew it was intentionally blank says this was a setup on her part. She wanted to corner this guy. And it's for his own benefit, right? To bring this to his attention, it's in a way that's going to make him uncomfortable, but at the same time, making him uncomfortable in that way might just get his attention and make him think twice, as he seems to, like in being in the process of doing, about what he's up to.
Oh, this lady has him absolutely cowed in submission, man. His hands are in his pockets. He's folding up.
The body language is,
He's defeated. 603-283-6160. Do you feel like you had informed consent when you got vaccinated? 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
And now, time for something totally different. Intercoin is a project that's working to make crypto mainstream. We use the power of smart contracts to help any community in the world launch their own cryptocurrency. Ever wanted to release your own coin or build your own app to grow your business? Intercoin's team builds apps that have reached 9 million people around the world. And now it's time to help make a real social impact in your local community. Go to intercoin.org and join the movement. That's intercoin.org.
You know, when we first started Intercoin about 3 years ago, we had a big vision to help every community in the world have access to the same tools that large states and federations do, to hold local elections on the blockchain, to have their own local currency, shop local, hire local, and help fight the forces of globalization that have decimated some of these communities.
Go to intercoin.org and join the movement.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denzelo. Russia has ordered the closure of the country's longest-running civil and human rights group, International Memorial. The Supreme Court closed it after prosecutors labelled the organisation a public threat, backed by Western countries to draw attention to Soviet-era crimes. Memorial was founded to remember victims of that period of Russian history, millions of whom were imprisoned and executed. Meanwhile, Russia and the US will hold security talks on January 10th. Confirmation comes amid tension with Ukraine and demands from Russia over NATO expansion. FSN's Julia Chapman has more.
The new year will bring a flurry of diplomatic efforts to reach a rapprochement with Russia over security concerns. The West accuses Moscow of a substantial military buildup around Ukraine. Amid rising tensions, Russia issued a series of demands about NATO's presence in Europe. It wants the military bloc to promise not to expand eastwards and to limit military activity in countries bordering Russia. In the second week of January, Russian negotiators will meet with US, NATO and European counterparts to put forward its demands in person. Officials say Moscow's concerns will be heard, but the two sides are coming from drastically different positions. Julia Chapman, Moscow.
The charity Save the Children has blamed Myanmar's military for the deaths of 2 of its staff members. It says more than 35 people were killed in an attack in the east of the country, and the organisation has called on the United Nations Security Council to take action. The US has halved the self-isolation time for those testing positive for COVID-19 in an attempt to get people back to work quicker. As the Omicron variant spreads across the country, staff shortages have caused disruption, in particular for airlines. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reduced the recommended isolation time for asymptomatic patients from 10 to 5 days. Industries have been impacted, with more people needing to isolate amid a surge in Omicron cases. Airlines have cancelled thousands of flights over the last few days, another 700 in the US on Tuesday. But some health experts have criticised the lack of testing at the end of the isolation period. The US is struggling to keep up with the spike in people needing testing, despite promises by the government to provide 500 million at-home test kits. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Children will return to New York City classrooms in the new year despite a surge in COVID-19 cases. When a positive case is recorded in a New York City public school classroom, the entire class will no longer have to switch to temporary remote learning. Instead, the city will provide all students with at-home testing kits, and they'll be allowed to return to in-person learning, provided those tests are negative and they're asymptomatic. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to weigh in with your thoughts and opinions. 603-283-6160 if you would like to do that. Again, that number 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Arya.
It's Ian.
And I have good news for all the people who were concerned about the video that we just shared. The AP has been kind enough to fact-check this entire thing. Don't worry, it was, in fact, intentionally left-flanked. See, I was holding out this hope that maybe this lady, she has a side gig as a magician, so she just did some sleight of hand and actually gave him back, this empty one when she pocketed the one that had all the useful information on it, or maybe it was just staged with a friend of hers in a place meant to look like a pharmacy. But if they did that, they did a really good job. But no, it's actually legit. This has been going around for several months now. The packaging insert with the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine is suspiciously blank, containing no information about ingredients and side effects normally found with the vaccine. And presumably this is equally true for the Pfizer and the Moderna as well. That's the claim, at least. AP's assessment is that it's missing context. The paper insert states that it was intentionally left blank and that FDA-authorized fact sheets are available electronically, according to a Johnson & Johnson representative.
Right, so everybody who doesn't have the internet is basically unable to do any kind of meaningful research, right?
Oh, that's a really good point, yeah.
I mean, I realize that people take for granted that we have the internet, so therefore everyone must have the internet, but it's not true. There are still people who voluntarily choose to not go online and or do not have any way of easily going online, have no experience. I mean, our regular caller she calls almost every night, Sarah, in New Mexico. I don't know if has ever been online. How
does she find the show? Oh, it airs in New Mexico.
It was airing it is airing actually on weekends in Albuquerque.
Yeah, that would be how she found it.
Yeah. So those people
It's easy to forget that, though, man, because the internet is so interwoven into my life that when I had to spend like 3 days without it post the raid that occurred on March the 16th, it was difficult to have just no internet access whatsoever. Yeah. It's a jarring experience, but there are people out there who are like, yes, this is a better way of living, or who are just like Sarah, and I've gotten this far without the internet. Why do I need it now?
They just don't see the value in it. Yeah, I mean, how are those people supposed to do any meaningful research?
Well, they can't. And this is intended to ensure that vaccinators and consumers refer to the most up-to-date information about the vaccine during the FDA's emergency use authorization, the representative said. So I wonder if this is still true of Pfizer, which has full authorization. It's no longer under emergency use. It's got an actual brand name and everything called Comirnaty.
Yeah.
That's actually the name of the COVID-19 vaccine from Pfizer.
Yeah, is that one also intentionally blank, or is it now that it's a full release, now they've got something published?
It would be interesting to see.
Who knows? But, regardless of whatever the AP says here, the point is very clear in that video that lady is attempting to make, and that is that this pharmacist doesn't even know what he's doing.
Yeah, that's
true.
true.
He's just doing what he is told.
Yeah, you would think at least at some point that he would have known that this information was available online.
Mm-hmm.
And to his credit, he did go to look it up, but that doesn't help the consumer much because he's way back there in the back looking at his computer. Was he going to read off the entire thing to her? Doesn't seem very likely. They move on. The facts. The video, I don't know what video they're referring to, shows a blonde woman in a white lab coat opening a Johnson & Johnson vaccine package. She finds a piece of paper folded on top, which she unfolds into a large sheet that is blank, except for one small section of text, which is what we just saw in regard to, I believe they said that was for the Moderna vaccine. I don't recall now, though. A lot of safety and efficacy data. In fact, all of the normal information we would find in a package insert, like the ingredients, that would all be found right here in this package insert, the woman says in the video. Must be magic. It's all blank. Now, obviously, this went viral and, got lots of viewers online. However, Lisa Canelos, Johnson & Johnson's Director of Global Corporate Media Relations, explained that the section on the paper includes instructions to access that information online. So that's pretty much all they have to say about it. I'm just sort of shocked to find that it's true that they just included. You would think, right, the way they would normally do this is they would give you all of that data and they would say, hey, this stuff at the very end, this information may be out of date. Please refer to this website for the latest up-to-date information.
Give you something.
Yeah. But instead of these, there's just
they literally
nothing.
print out an entire, I don't know how big that sheet was, but it's gigantic.
Oh, that's true. They could have just put it on a Post-it note,
right?
Instead, they created the illusion of having included something of value, but it's not of any value.
Yeah.
Not even a QR code for people to scan if they want to bring up the data, right? That would be, here's a little Post-it note with the QR code on it. That'll take you to the latest data. But no, nothing, just...
It might as well just say, do your own research on it. Good luck.
Well, they're certainly not doing it for people, and sadly, that pharmacist at least is not doing it for themselves. So we were talking about China prior to this, COVID-19, all of this stuff. I mean, it's alarming that a pharmacist doesn't know anything about the vaccines or even how to readily provide a consumer with information on those vaccines. But one of the things that the governments have done, like China, throughout this pandemic is lock down economies. And this has had rippling consequences that we've been dealing with for more than 2 years now. Like here in New Hampshire, they only actually locked down for like 2 weeks, and it was a really weak lockdown on top of that.
Yeah, they called it a stay-at-home. It wasn't called a lockdown.
Like the bars and the restaurants, I think, were some of the restaurants were closed. I'm not exactly sure, but
they were takeout only.
Yeah, and a lot of them were like, we're not making enough money to stay open, so let's just close down for 2 weeks. But it was really minor, but those 2 weeks of being shut down are continuing to have an impact on the economy today with staffing shortages just everywhere. That began during the lockdown, as far as I can tell. That's when everyone wanted to order takeout and delivery, and that's when no one wanted to work in takeout and delivery. And the issues have just been sort of compounding one another since then. And of course, now they're talking about we may need to lock down again here in the United States. I don't see it happening, especially with Biden today saying, there's no federal way out of this.
Yeah, wasn't that an interesting development? I mean, he who had a plan in 2020 when he was running for office to deal with COVID.
Oh, of course he did.
Because Trump had no plan, according to Biden. So he's got a plan, and now he's saying, nope, my hands are off this. We're just going to let the states take care of it, which is fine. It's actually, the best thing he could possibly say is, hey, federalism, go for it, states. You guys do different things, try things differently, have at it. We're not going to interfere. I mean, that's essentially the libertarian position if you want to, assign that to it.
It's the most libertarian position we could have without abolishing the states.
Right,
certainly.
yeah, without him resigning the office and ending the federal government, for them to say, all right, we're just not going to tell you what to do. Of course, at the same time, they still have all these stupid rules as far as airlines and things like that. So it's not as though the federal government gang isn't completely hands-off on this matter.
And, on that note with the airlines, it's amazing to me how the media normalizes ideas to people, right? Like Fauci, I think it was Sunday, made a throwaway comment, spoke very briefly about, there may come a time to seriously consider vaccine passports to get on an airplane or something to that effect. Yeah. And every single day, it wasn't even Sunday, it was sometime last week that he said this. Every single day for the last few days on Drudge Report, it's had a new article about how Fauci is saying that this is going to happen, or it needs to happen, or it should be considered. Today's is from MSN.com saying Fauci says domestic travel vaccination rule should be considered.
Yeah, they're floating it out there.
And the wording behind the headlines just gets stronger and stronger every single day, when what he said wasn't really that big a deal. I mean, it wasn't like he's suggesting that we need to actually consider this. I think he's probably aware that the federal government wouldn't be able to get away with it.
Why not?
It would just shut down the airline industry, I would imagine.
Well, it would certainly reduce their passenger load.
Well, it would also increase their workload, and they already are canceling thousands of flights because they don't have any staff.
You mean by having to check people's vaccine passports?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just one more document to check at the counter. I don't think it's going to increase it that much.
603-283-6160. When we come back, we're going to talk about the economy and how employers are trying to fix the job situation. It's Free Talk Live.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm. Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 27th through July 3rd for the 6th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out for the first time in 2021. Fork Fest takes place the week after Pork Fest, but Fork Fest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 27th through July 3rd. There's no better place to celebrate Independence Day than around other freedom-loving activists in the Shire. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest Forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there. Forkfest.party. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. Arya and Ian here in the studio tonight. Employers are having a difficult time finding employees, and at this point, as far as I can tell, they've tried every trick in the book, including offering benefits, 401ks, health insurance, wage increases, and all of this other stuff. I can't imagine that a person starting at McDonald's right now, just at the one here in Keene, which is closed at least one day a week.
Still.
And last time I looked, I don't know, it's been a few weeks since I paid any attention to it, but I think they were closing on Sundays previously. So this is a McDonald's. It used to be a 24 hours a day McDonald's.
The gas station right 2 doors down from it, also a 24-hour gas station for the first time in the history of me living here in the last 15 years, was completely dark at least 2 of the nights that I drove by it, just in the evening. Completely dark.
I don't understand how it's happening.
Yeah.
But people aren't wanting to work for whatever reason. And of course, a lot of people got fired because they didn't want to be vaccinated. And I found an interesting story that we might get into at some point from MSNBC that is about that. Apparently, a lot of these red states, they have legislatures who are trying to create it so that if you get fired or you quit because you refuse to get the vaccine, you can still qualify for unemployment.
Can you get unemployment if you quit?
If you quit because you refuse to get vaccinated is what they're trying to make happen.
Wow.
In some states.
Okay.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Like I said, we may actually get into the article, may not, but employers have to do something to get people hired, and whatever it is they're doing doesn't seem to be working. So you have a story about how they're also easing job requirements in order to get people into the door. And the place at which I worked, a little over a month ago, they had people saying, look, we'll hire anybody who, all they have to do is have a pulse at this point.
Yeah, but will they hire a person if they're not willing to wear a mask?
I don't know. Because they would have back then.
Yeah, because that's, you're talking about a corporate store that is, or a franchise, but it's still part of, connected to this big corporation. And you'd said that the other night you walked by there or whatever, and you saw that everybody in the store had masks on. So
yeah, it was really sad, and it's what made me realize, oh, this is why they're not calling me to pick up any of the shifts from people call out or whatever. Because they know I'm going to go, yeah, no, thank you.
There was a girl who I saw on social media saying that she wants to move to New Hampshire from Boston because she's sick of living in this insane city where now they're going to start having vaccination requirements to go out and do things, to go in in indoor spaces like restaurants. And she works in the restaurant industry, and she's looking into moving to New Hampshire, looking for jobs in restaurants. And I said, hey, don't worry, you can throw a stone and hit a dozen businesses that want to hire. I mean, literally everybody is hiring up here. And she came back and she made a good point. She said, well, I'm more interested in working for a place that doesn't want to require me to wear a mask and be vaccinated. And that does make me wonder, when you're going around looking for a job, when you pull that card out and say, yeah, I'm willing to work here, but I'm not going to wear a mask, are you still willing to hire me? I wonder what that does to your chances. I mean, because literally everywhere is hiring. So if you say that to enough people, somebody's going to say, yeah, no problem, you can work for me, I think. But the question is, how many employers do you have to go through before you'll find one that is accepting?
Well, luckily here in Keene, at least, we could point such a person to several businesses that would not require them to wear masks. But in most places, sure, you'd have to.
The more corporate, the more masky it's likely to be.
Yeah, because at a certain point, they just become that pharmacist where they're just doing what they're paid to do, and that's all they know about it. It would be a good indicator would be to walk down Main Street and see which stores have employees working who aren't wearing masks.
Well, yeah, that's obviously something that would give you a good clue for
sure.
I
imagine that's hard to find, though, because the Belgian place that I like so much, I said recently it was Dutch. I don't know why I thought it was Dutch. It's Belgian. However, they are strongly against the mask mandates.
We know the owner is because he spoke at the mask mandate meeting against the mandates.
And the restaurant actually posted something along those lines on Facebook publicly. So taking a stand against the masks. Good. But the employees there are wearing masks. But that could just be the employees' choices, It
could be, and it might be that the employees are afraid because they know that in theory they could receive a fine if they are given a warning and then a second warning, a verbal and then a written warning, and then it's a $100 fine, and maybe they're just afraid. They're worried some customer is going to call the police on them or something like that.
I mean, really, yeah, but as we've seen, some of the police officers don't even want to enforce this nonsense.
I suspect most of them don't.
And the ones who do show up to enforce it don't seem to be particularly enthusiastic about it. And then you can always just say, yeah, no, I don't want to give you my name. And if you're not driving, you don't have to identify, as I understand it.
Okay,
at least here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, if you're not driving, you don't have to identify. However, if you are being written a ticket, now, I don't know how this applies to warnings, but if a cop is writing you a ticket for something,
they'd have to find something to ticket you over first, though.
I know, I get what you're saying, but they have to know who you are in order to write the ticket. And if you refuse to identify, they are authorized to take you into custody until they can determine who you are to write the ticket. So
would that apply here?
I'm telling you about a rule that applies here. There's actually a local ordinance that you can actually be charged with for refusing to identify as well. So I don't know how that applies to warnings. So I know that's true for a ticket. I don't know if that is true for just issuing somebody a warning. So I think in theory,
Well, they have to write something down.
Right. That's the thing, is if you were to go to the Free Keene article at freekeene.com from, I don't know, a week ago when I posted the video of the hearing, the hearing on the mask mandate, I also included in that video the debate, if you will, between the city councilors at the final meeting where they voted for it 10-3. And it was in that meeting that the city manager named Elizabeth Dragon speaks up and says that, well, she's against the idea of ticketing individuals directly.
Why?
She wants to target the business owners because it's easier for the bureaucrats.
It's also more effective.
It was, yes.
Yeah, that way you have all of the businesses throughout Keene enforcing the mask mandate because theirs were the heads on the chopping block.
Correct. But to the city councilors' credit, they don't deserve a lot, but at least they made the change to where it's the individuals that are being targeted. But her reasoning, the city manager's reasoning for not wanting to target individuals, was because it was going to be harder to do, harder to enforce, because then they'd have to come up with like a database, which they don't have, right? Like there's not an app out there that exists to track who gets a verbal warning, who gets the written warning. Okay, what step are we at with this process of? So they're going to have to come up with a spreadsheet, and then the officer is going to have to identify the person, presuming that they even bother to go through these steps. Identify the person, write down on the spreadsheet that you've got a written warning issued to the person. Then that way the next officer knows, okay, well, Jim Jones, he's been given the verbal warning, so now we got to give him a written warning. And what you were referring to was an experiment that was done over at the Mighty Moose Mart, which is a Liberty-owned business here in town, where they gave a guy free lunch to hang around and wait for the cops as they called the police on him for not wearing a mask in the business. And the police officer told this guy, who was, again, allegedly not wearing a mask, said, well, do you want to give me your name so I can give you the warning? And that is obviously an option, right? Like that officer just gave that person the option of saying no. But
you always have the option of saying no. You just may get arrested for it.
That's what I'm saying. I suspect that officer is using discretion on his ability to say, oh, well, you don't want to tell me who you are. Well, I can arrest you and we'll find out who you are and then give you a verbal warning and release you. Well, so they could do that, I think, but obviously they don't want to, because they don't want to give somebody a warning in the first place. So that's why the officer's just like, okay, and turn around and, left.
Plus, if the officer did that, then he would be the first officer in the entire Keene police force who essentially arrested someone over not wearing a mask.
Yeah, that's true.
And none of them are going to want to be that guy.
I think you're right.
Or that girl.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm not happy that there's a mask mandate, but I'm glad that it targets individuals rather than business owners, because last time it was very difficult to find places to go if you weren't willing to wear a mask in order to go there. This time it's nowhere nearly as bad.
Yeah.
You can pretty much go and do whatever you want. The places that were super ecstatic about the mask ordinance last time, like there's a burger place here that was all about it. They're still going to be enforcing it, but most places, I suspect most business owners around here don't even know that the mask mandate has been put back in place. They have one of those giant traffic signs that light up with random messages or whatever as you come down Main Street saying mask ordinance in effect or something like that now.
Wow.
Well, no one knows it's happening.
70% of downtown businesses were polled by a downtown business group, and they opposed this mandate. So they do know that it exists, and they're not happy about it.
603-283-6160 if you want to talk about this absurd mask mandate and the impossibility of trying to enforce it. It's Free Talk Live.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com. I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denzelo. Russia has ordered the closure of the country's longest-running civil and human rights group, International Memorial. The Supreme Court closed it after prosecutors labelled the organisation a public threat, backed by Western countries to draw attention to Soviet-era crimes. Memorial was founded to remember victims of that period of Russian history, millions of whom were imprisoned and executed. Meanwhile, Russia and the US will hold security talks on January 10th. Confirmation comes amid tension with Ukraine and demands from Russia over NATO expansion. FSN's Julia Chapman has more.
The new year will bring a flurry of diplomatic efforts to reach a rapprochement with Russia over security concerns. The West accuses Moscow of a substantial military buildup around Ukraine. Amid rising tensions, Russia issued a series of demands about NATO's presence in Europe. It wants the military bloc to promise not to expand eastwards and to limit military activity in countries bordering Russia. In the second week of January, Russian negotiators will meet with US, NATO and European counterparts to put forward its demands in person. Officials say Moscow's concerns will be heard, but the two sides are coming from drastically different positions. Julia Chapman, Moscow.
The charity Save the Children has blamed Myanmar's military for the deaths of 2 of its staff members. It says more than 35 people were killed in an attack in the east of the country, and the organisation has called on the United Nations Security Council to take action. The US has halved the self-isolation time for those testing positive for COVID-19 in an attempt to get people back to work quicker. As the Omicron variant spreads across the country, staff shortages have caused disruption, in particular for airlines. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reduced the recommended isolation time for asymptomatic patients from 10 to 5 days. Industries have been impacted with more people needing to isolate amid a surge in Omicron cases. Airlines have cancelled thousands of flights over the last few days, another 700 in the US on Tuesday. But some health experts have criticised the lack of testing at the end of the isolation period. The US is struggling to keep up with the spike in people needing testing, despite promises by the government to provide 500 million at-home test kits. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Children will return to New York City classrooms in the new year despite a surge in COVID-19 cases. When a positive case is recorded in a New York City public school classroom, the entire class will no longer have to switch to temporary remote learning. Instead, the city will provide all students with at-home testing kits, and they'll be allowed to return to in-person learning, provided those tests are negative and they're asymptomatic. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, more memories of Desmond Tutu, who died over the weekend at the age of 90. Today's come from John Carlin, the former South Africa bureau chief for The Independent, recalling Archbishop Tutu's stewardship of a funeral for 48 people massacred by apartheid-era security forces in June 1992.
There was a township outside Johannesburg called Boy Patong, where 48 people were massacred one day. The amazing thing was that he wept And he absolutely sort of tapped into the sorrow and indeed the anger of the people. But at the same time, he managed also to inject some humor into the proceedings. Only Tutu could pull this off. He had this sort of perfect judgment of tone. And at one point in the speech, after weeping and expressing all the sorrow of the people's deaths, he said, look, how ridiculous, not only how unjust, but how ridiculous this apartheid system is. What if, instead of discriminating against people because of the color of their skin, they'd chosen to discriminate against people with big noses, like mine? And he sort of went off on this sort of whole diatribe about the absurdity of the whole thing of selecting skin color as opposed to other physical characteristics to discriminate against people the way apartheid so systematically and horribly did. And smiles came to people's faces. And again, he defused the tension.
Tomorrow, further memories of Archbishop Tutu from veteran South African journalist John Battersby. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo.
From the admission of Ant Colony 000082567 KLN 00067X into the Union in 1897, to the day in 1817 when embarrassed construction workers realized they put the Erie Canal in the wrong place. The Onion looks back at This Week in History. On August 5th, 1962, Nelson Mandela was jailed until 1990, becoming fully rehabilitated through the South African penal system. And thanks to the services provided to him while imprisoned, emerged from jail a successful politician and internationally revered symbol of peace. Mandela's record of overcoming hardships and moving South Africa beyond its formidable racial struggles is a lasting testament to South Africa's correctional facilities and prove that the penal system's small cells, demeaning work duties, and minimal rations are exactly the tools needed for a prisoner to truly become a reformed citizen.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, where, as always, you're invited to take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is important to you. Whether you want to talk about the economy or, coming up, as we want to talk about, an Oxford scholar evidently is alleging that Bitcoin is even worse than a Ponzi scheme. We're hopefully going to get into that, and hopefully going to get into The Matrix, because I actually watched the new Matrix movie last night, and I found it to be quite enjoyable, and I'd like to discuss it a little bit.
All right.
Especially because it's led to a resurrection of people who just want to make absolutely sure that I know that the Matrix movies are all about being trans, when they're not. And I think it's sad how easily misinformation gets spread like that. But we also want to talk about employers and how they're lowering job requirements in order to get people in the door. We're curious to know whether or not one of those requirements that they're willing to lower is, maybe you can take that mask off.
Mm-hmm.
Worst case scenario, you have to work in the back. But before we get back into that, we have Silent Ox, who is calling from Maine. Silent Ox, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, what's on your mind tonight?
Hey, I'm about to lose my job. So,
is it because of a vaccine mandate or something like that?
Yeah, it is. I'm up in Maine.
Okay.
Where do you work?
Specifically, Jesus Christ. Sorry.
So where do you work at?
I'm smoking a cigar, so it just hit me. So I'm gonna put it out.
You're what? So
where do you work?
Yeah, where do you work?
I work in Scarborough.
A cigar bar?
Scarborough.
Is there somebody else on the line?
Yeah, that's very peculiar.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. My girlfriend.
Okay.
I work at Abbott Laboratories.
Mm-hmm. And what is
that?
We
make the test.
Oh, you make tests. Well, yeah, I mean, it would figure that they would be following the rules as closely as they possibly can. Sorry to hear that, man. This is like a Maine requirement, right? Like, didn't the governor of Maine put in a mandate that said that all healthcare providers, healthcare-related companies have to mandate the vaccine for all employees or fire them?
No.
They did not put that in. This is who now?
Joe Biden mandate.
Oh, okay.
Not Janet Mills.
Didn't that get, put on hold or something like that? I thought that
No, the court brought it back, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but Abbott is also FDA associated, so
okay,
that's coming into play.
I mean, that's very unfortunate. I mean, all of this was telegraphed a long time ago. I'm really sorry to hear that you're going to lose your job there, Silent Ox. And I can't even say in this particular scenario that moving to New Hampshire would do you any good, but we all knew this was coming. We knew it was coming like 18 months ago. People had the opportunity then to resist something simple like the mask mandates, and they didn't. And then there were vaccines, and we knew that vaccine mandates were coming, and people had the opportunity to resist that, and very few people did. And then we knew that the mask mandates were going to be returning, even though people were getting vaccinated, and people had the opportunity to resist that. It looks like they may finally be willing to some degree to actually offer up some amount of resistance. But no, the government has already learned it can force people to do these things. And it's going to.
According to WMTW.com, August 12th of this year, Governor Janet Mills of Maine issued a vaccine mandate for the state's healthcare workers. So that did happen. Now, whether or not that applies to manufacturers of healthcare equipment, maybe it didn't. So maybe that particular mandate didn't apply to his business, and then the Biden mandate came along, and then they said, all right, well, we have to do this. And it's sad, but what are you going to do? I guess, find better work, strike out for yourself, become an entrepreneur if you can. Otherwise, you got to look for another job, which sucks.
And if you have to find another job, you may not be able to find one where you can work there without being vaccinated. It's a terrible situation, but, we all knew that it was coming.
If you're libertarian, move to New Hampshire.
Yeah, things are at least better here. But, I mean, if you want to work in healthcare or something like that, even here in New Hampshire, I believe, somehow you have to be vaccinated.
Are doing it on their own volition here.
So is that why?
There's not a mandate from the government gang here. It's just... They're just, showing how obedient they are in general and how they want to,
But that's the weird thing about New Hampshire. Right? Is that I'm cutting out quite
I'm
a
not
bit.
hearing you cut out.
Okay,
That must be your headphones.
in. Okay, that's the weird thing about New Hampshire, though, is that all of the hospitals and stuff that at least I'm aware of require people. I mean, they're parts of the state, aren't they? Aren't they like heavily state funded or something?
I mean, all hospitals get money from the state. I mean, they get a ton of money from Medicare or Medicaid or whatever, federal government. I'm sure there's local state money that goes to hospitals as well. But ultimately, they are quote unquote private hospitals. It's just that they want to signal to people out there that they're concerned about people's health. So they have to show. They're signaling, and so that's why they're doing it, I'm sure.
Excellent point. We also have Sarah on the line from New Mexico. You're on Free Talk Live, Sarah.
Yes. How am I coming? Am I off the speakerphone? Can you hear me pretty well?
You sound fine.
Yes. So our city, they want to try a new signal light, and I have never heard of this kind of signal light, so I'm still trying to figure out what they mean. But it seems like all of them, they're going to get the red light as they're speeding into the intersection. It will only turn green if they're maintaining the speed limit. So that I guess they run the red light when they can't stop when it turns red. So that's what they're trying to prevent.
This sounds like a terrible idea. Like if someone's speeding, it's going to be very dangerous for them to screech to a halt because the light has turned red.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I think it's so that it registers your speed entering the I don't know when they're going to register you, and whether they want to turn it green or red. The sensor, the computer is going to decide.
Now, where did you hear about this? You're saying this is coming to Albuquerque, or that you want it to come to Albuquerque?
No, they want to implement it. So it was announced on the radio news and it was announced on the TV news. So they want to implement. They want to give this a try. So this is a very new intersection, and it sounds okay until we find out what the problems are. But it sounds okay. The problem is that I used to drive, believe it or not, and when it was the green, I never knew it was the beginning of the green, middle of the green, or at the end of the green. And if I knew what green I had, I could figure out what speed to maintain.
You can generally assess that sort of thing based on the amount of traffic that is in front of you at the intersection.
But it's very hard because people always wind up running the red light without wanting to. They don't want to. They didn't even know they'd run a red light. All of a sudden, it just went from yellow.
No, Sarah. They wanted to. I mean, those people who pull out into the middle of the intersection in order to make their left turn, they know they're running a red light, but everyone does it, so they don't care. So, I mean, they know they're doing it. They just don't care.
Well, if you pull out into the intersection, you're not technically running the red light because you're already out in the intersection.
Is that why no one ever gets pulled over for doing it?
That's my guess.
Okay.
I mean, you've intended to turn. You're already in the process, basically, of turning. It's just that you're waiting until the yellow triggers people to stop coming before you have the ability to actually turn.
Yes, but you're past the white line at that point.
That's right.
So you may get pulled over for that because you didn't stop at the white line.
Over here in Albuquerque, it means yellow means to step on the gas and speed up even more. I mean, you guys up in New Hampshire, it means slow down because somebody want to turn a left
No,
turn.
yellow always means speed up so you can get through the intersection everywhere you go, Sarah. Albuquerque isn't any different. And this technology apparently has been around for a little while. I was just looking it up, and according to Roadshow over at CNET.com, in an article written a decade ago, May of 2011, next-gen traffic lights will turn red if you're speeding. So,
Sarah, thank you so much for the call tonight. It sounds like a terrible idea to me. You wouldn't want to intentionally slow down and stop the people who are actively speeding because they're less likely to be able to brake in time in order to actually catch said red light. Then they just fly out into the intersection and they hit some poor pedestrian.
Who knows how far down the road they're triggering, the speed check. I don't know.
True. What are your thoughts on this? Sounds to me like a bad idea. It's Free Talk Live.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Brute force, intransigent defiance, adamantine will. These are the hallmarks of the AI tank. These gigantic machines have the firepower of an army, but they also have their own sense of honor and duty. When the world breakers arrive, battle will be joined, planets will shake, and war and peace will never be the same again. World Breakers. Stories from David Weber, Larry Correa, and more. Available August 3rd from BaneBooks.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
My name is Angel Rach. I'm a mother of 2 teenage children, and I fought all the way to the Supreme Court for the right to use the medicine that saved my life. I've been permanently disabled for 10 years, with an inoperable brain tumor, wasting syndrome, and several other serious conditions. For 4 years, I was in a wheelchair, in so much pain, I couldn't even hug my kids. The hardest part was looking in their eyes and seeing how much they were suffering because of my medical condition. The medicine that gave me my life back and gave my kids their mom back was cannabis, also known as medical marijuana. With medical marijuana, I can walk, maintain my weight, and I can be a mom. Without it, my doctors believe that I would die. To learn more about medical marijuana, contact Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or on the web at mpp.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160 if you want to join us. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And we've been talking about Bitcoin for years here on the show. And if you still don't know what that is, head on over to bitcoin.com to get started learning about cryptocurrency. All you have to do is take a few minutes out of your day to click Getting Started. Watch a couple of videos and learn about this important world-changing information that, according to this Oxford scholar who is totally important and knows exactly what he's talking about, that's sarcasm, by the way, Bitcoin could just be worse than a Ponzi scheme. Learn why that isn't true at bitcoin.com. But if you already know that's just nonsense being peddled by the establishment, news.bitcoin.com can help you stay up to date on all of the news and headlines that are relevant to you. All of that and more on a sleek, easy-to-use modern website, including, evidently, the ability to acquire Bitcoin if you want. All of that and more, bitcoin.com. We now have Richard on the line from New Mexico. Richard, you're on Free Talk Live. Are you there, Richard?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I had you people on speaker. January 1st, our Albuquerque bus system is going free rides for everybody. And I called into a radio talk show here in Albuquerque yesterday afternoon after I talked to a few bus drivers the last few days, and we have a real bad homeless people population here in Albuquerque, and a lot of people are calling into local radio talk shows. They're concerned about all the homeless people that are going to be taking advantage of the free bus rides.
I want to interrupt just one quick second, Richard, to say thank you. I appreciate that you refer to homeless people as homeless people and not, quote, the homeless, because that's always bothered me, because homeless is an adjective, not a person. It's like calling someone a trans or a gay or something like that, right? Or you're not a homeless, you're a homeless person. I think the person thing is important, and I appreciate that you're, referring to them as human beings.
Oh, definitely. I was homeless 18 years ago in Austin, Texas, but that's a whole nother story. I'm a decorated Vietnam veteran, and I managed to get on a veterans program to get homeless veterans off of the street. And a lot of people here in Albuquerque are calling in with their concerns about how many homeless people are going to be riding on the buses all day long.
What are your
And
thoughts on that?
also,
Does it concern you?
Not since I was homeless myself. I get along with homeless people still quite well. I understand their problems, but
you do bring up an interesting point. Like when I've never heard of this proposal before, and according to KOB, which is a news site out there in Albuquerque, it is one of the largest cities in the nation to pilot a zero fare program. So there may be some other places where this is going on, but certainly the first time I've heard about it. Generally government buses are losers, meaning they lose money. They are constantly operating in the red, regardless of whatever it is the fares are. So, is it really going to make that big of a difference to get rid of the fares as far as the amount of money the government is spending on this? I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I suspect it won't make a huge amount of difference. But on the other hand, you do bring up an interesting point, Richard. It's like, okay, if there's no fare, then what's to prevent the homeless people who literally have nothing else to do to just sit on a bus all day long and drive around the city day long?
I'm not sure what value there would be in preventing that.
Well, if it is too popular, then it would make it so somebody who does actually have to go somewhere won't be able to get on the bus and go there. And I don't think it would become that much of a problem, but it is an interesting objection to it.
Well, thank you so much. Do you have another thought on that, Richard?
Well, yes. A lot of the homeless people get on buses now, and you wonder when was the last time they had a bath or shower for their hygiene. And also, a lot of the homeless people have mental problems, and quite a few of them have problems with bus drivers and other passengers on the buses already.
Well, right, because they're crazy. So they, not all of them, right? Like some homeless people are not crazy, but if you're a homeless person, you probably have a higher propensity of being crazy, and so that is going to result in problems. That's going to result in fights on the bus. It's going to result in. There was a recent video, somebody showing a bus lunatic with like a flamethrower.
Oh my God!
Not an actual like proper flamethrower, but like an aerosol can and a lighter, just trying to torch people or whatever.
It's Jesus.
You never know what kind of crazies you're going to run into on the the city bus. So thanks, Richard, for bringing the story up. And apparently the city council there in Albuquerque voted unanimously to do what is a 12-month zero fare pilot program. So, I presume that if a homeless person gets on a bus and just sits there for the entire loop, right? Because, the buses go in a certain loop. Each one of them has a certain course that they go on. I would presume that at some point the bus driver should say, all right, Jim, you got to get off the bus at some point. You can't just stay here all day. Obviously, they're going to have to get off unless they just start peeing in the bus. They will have to get off for that reason at some point. So it's an interesting experiment. As a libertarian, I don't support government buses at all. I don't think they should exist. I think that let the marketplace come up with solutions, and there are compassionate organizations that would provide transportation for homeless people in the same way that they provide transportation for the elderly, for instance, to get from a nursing home to a doctor's appointment or something like that. So there are charitable organizations out there that could handle these sorts of things. We don't need all of this to be subsidized by the taxpayers of Albuquerque or wherever.
No, but if they're going to have a public transit system, it seems like it should, at minimum, be free to use.
Yeah, it does create problems as somebody who has ridden public transport before.
I actually don't think I ever have. So
I used to ride the embarrassingly named Scat Bus in Sarasota, Florida, back when I was a kid a lot. And if you don't have the exact change or whatever, then you're not getting on the bus. Now, they, of course, later added the machines that'll take $1 or whatever. But there's always somebody that doesn't have the change. And
so what would, like, if the bus fare was 35 cents or whatever and you had $1, obviously you wouldn't get change back, but would they even take your $1? Or they say, no, it has to be exactly 35 cents?
I think they would make change for you. I think the machine could make change, but honestly, it's been so long since I've ridden a bus, I don't recall. Okay. But they did ultimately end up accepting dollars. So, but there's always somebody they don't have the change, and usually somebody's on the bus who's got an extra quarter or whatever. They step up and put it in, and pay it forward and get somebody on. So it usually isn't that big of a problem. But there are some difficulties that people encounter with having to pay for bus fare.
I would be interested to know whether or not Albuquerque has some sort of stipulation within this agreement that allows a bus driver to tell a passenger, hey, no, we've come all full circle. We're back to where we started. And you
gotta go.
Yeah, you have to get off the bus at this point.
Right.
I don't know. And, that sort of thing can definitely lead to altercations, especially with some of these homeless people who, as everyone knows, some of them can be fairly disturbed mentally. 603-283-6160. You can weigh in with your thoughts on eliminating fares on public transportation. 603-283-6160.
Free Talk Live's video archives have been on LBRY for years. LBRY is an uncensorable, decentralized, blockchain-based media sharing protocol, and we're big fans of it here on Free Talk Live. In 2020, LBRY launched Odyssey, a video sharing website to compete with YouTube, and it's really taking off. Now with over 1 million channels, many of whom are disaffected YouTube creators. During YouTube's crackdown for not towing the government line on COVID, the Free Talk Live YouTube channel started receiving strikes and could be completely taken down at any moment. Thankfully, Odyssey started offering live streaming, so we're now streaming live every night and posting our video archives permanently to Odyssey. You can watch live or anytime on our Odyssey channel by visiting video.freetalklive.com. If you want to go all in, download the desktop app at lbry.com, and then every video archive you watch, you'll help seed and keep it online forever. At minimum, we ask you visit video.freetalklive.com and follow us on Odyssey today. video.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denzelo. Russia has ordered the closure of the country's longest-running civil and human rights group, International Memorial. The Supreme Court closed it after prosecutors labelled the organisation a public threat, backed by Western countries to draw attention to Soviet-era crimes. Memorial was founded to remember victims of that period of Russian history, millions of whom were imprisoned and executed. Meanwhile, Russia and the US will hold security talks on January 10th. Confirmation comes amid tension with Ukraine and demands from Russia over NATO expansion. FSN's Julia Chapman has more.
The new year will bring a flurry of diplomatic efforts to reach a rapprochement with Russia over security concerns. The West accuses Moscow of a substantial military buildup around Ukraine. Amid rising tensions, Russia issued a series of demands about NATO's presence in Europe. It wants the military bloc to promise not to expand eastwards and to limit military activity in countries bordering Russia. In the second week of January, Russian negotiators will meet with US, NATO and European counterparts to put forward its demands in person. Officials say Moscow's concerns will be heard, but the two sides are coming from drastically different positions. Julia Chapman, Moscow.
The charity Save the Children has blamed Myanmar's military for the deaths of 2 of its staff members. It says more than 35 people were killed in an attack in the east of the country, and the organisation has called on the United Nations Security Council to take action. The US has halved the self-isolation time for those testing positive for COVID-19 in an attempt to get people back to work quicker. As the Omicron variant spreads across the country, staff shortages have caused disruption, in particular for airlines. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reduced the recommended isolation time for asymptomatic patients from 10 to 5 days. Industries have been impacted with more people needing to isolate amid a surge in Omicron cases. Airlines have cancelled thousands of flights over the last few days, another 700 in the US on Tuesday. But some health experts have criticised the lack of testing at the end of the isolation period. The US is struggling to keep up with the spike in people needing testing, despite promises by the government to provide 500 million at-home test kits. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Children will return to New York City classrooms in the new year despite a surge in COVID-19 cases. When a positive case is recorded in a New York City public school classroom, the entire class will no longer have to switch to temporary remote learning. Instead, the city will provide all students with at-home testing kits, and they'll be allowed to return to in-person learning, provided those tests are negative and they're asymptomatic. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, where you too can share your thoughts and opinions. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. Again, that's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And we're raising funds with Give Directly, which is the first nonprofit that allows you to give money directly to people living in extreme poverty. This way, you don't have to worry about some distant aid organization sitting around thinking, oh, we think the people in Bummett County could really use 20 pallets full of canned corn or whatever it is that these aid organizations typically give.
Mm-hmm.
In the past decade, Give Directly has delivered more than $400 million to more than 1 million people. And we're matching your donations to Give Directly. Well, if you use our link at least, if you use our particular fundraiser. You can find that at give.freetalklive.com. And again, there's no better way to help families that are actually living in extreme poverty than by giving them cash so that they can fuel the changes in their lives that they need, like nutrition, health, education, all of these things that we take for granted here in the West. Give Directly allows you to give them cash to actually pursue those things that they need and that will improve their lives. That's give.freetalklive.com. We have Bad Slave on the line from here in New Hampshire. Bad Slave, you're on Free Talk Live.
Decide to go blow through the light anyway, right?
Are you talking to us?
Something.
I don't know if he is or not. Bad Slave, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hang on. I'll call back. Hello. Sorry about that. A second call came in.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here. Go ahead.
All right, great. Sarah, with her, love of law enforcement, it does. I thought it was interesting that you all were asking her. Is there any laws that you think are not so good? And
this is on last night's show that you're talking about.
Right. She hardly ever really answers. She finds a way of skirting the question. Anyway, I can just see unintended consequences for these traffic light arrangements where they're going to interfere with the speeders.
You're referring to the traffic lights that will turn red if they detect someone traveling over the speed limit.
Right, and it has to be, a sensor that's quite a bit a ways away,
right?
So that you still have time to stop.
Well, yeah, they still have to put the yellow on, and that takes some seconds, right?
I guess the incentive here is to make people who are in a hurry slow down so that they're disincentivized from speeding, because it's going to just make them have to sit at a red light.
That's the intention. Yep.
How is this going to affect cops, though? Because cops speed all the time, especially when their lights are on, right?
Yeah.
Well,
the sensors won't know the difference.
The other thing is that people are going to realize that that's the way it works.
They'll learn where that sensor is, and they'll slow down for sure. And they may speed back up afterward.
Well, I'm just saying, they're going to they're going to know that the light is changing, not because there's other traffic, particularly at low traffic times, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and they'll go ahead and blow through it because they'll know there's nobody there.
Maybe they will. I don't know. I think you're giving them too much credit.
Going straight through a red light is a bit risky.
I think you're giving other drivers too much credit.
I'm saying in the case where you actually see that there's no traffic. I mean, depending on what's around. Sometimes it's just a light in cross street. And
I got to tell you though, man, I hit a number of red lights on my ride home from the show every single night, and some of them have just turned red for me. I mean, meaning they were just green for the lane that I'm in, and I know I'm going to be sitting there for a minute or two. I can see, man, there's no traffic around. But even when I wasn't on pre-release conditions, I wasn't just going to go and ignore the red light.
You usually
because
just want to look around and make sure.
Cops are everywhere,
right?
And they will absolutely pull you over for just barreling through a red light.
And one bail condition they always have is that you have to obey the laws.
Yep, can't even commit a violation on bail. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of people that are not on bail conditions, Not as many as we'd like, but
Still, well, thank you so much for the call tonight, Bad Slave. I'm still not convinced that running a red light is ever really worth it. I mean, you're going to end up with a ticket, most likely. I mean, a cop can see you running a red light from a pretty far distance.
I can't tell you how many times I've done it, but I always stop and look first. And then
well, there are some red lights that are certainly easier than others.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if I can't see, then I won't go.
Yeah.
But if I can clearly see there's no one coming, I'm going.
And the only actual red lights that are between here and my house are like on the highway. So there's likely a state trooper or King PD sitting around. So
I've turned onto that highway many times to
Really?
red. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. There's no one around.
No, man, but cops
New
love
Hampshire.
hanging out there.
I don't know.
Well, you've been here longer than I.
Yeah, I barely see cops around.
But before we got into all of the Sarah obsession over traffic and all of that sort of thing and red lights, we were talking about employers. Now, you also have a story about companies hiring unvaxxed workers, that meaning people who have not gotten the COVID-19 vaccine.
Correct.
And presumably showing, I mean, they need employees at this point.
That's right.
So has it gotten to the point where they're like, look, we'll hire you whether you're vaccinated or not?
Some companies.
That's good to hear then.
Yeah.
So you have a story about that?
Companies, according to the New York Post, have turned to recruiting unvaccinated workers in the latest effort to combat the nationwide labor shortage that's preventing companies from bouncing back from the depths of the pandemic. JP Valadez, a worker at Next Gen Code Company in Lubbock, Texas, launched a website called NoVaxMandate.org, an online job board to help connect unvaccinated workers with companies presumably that will hire them. Since the site's launch in August, it has drawn more than 2.25 million unique visitors, and over 20,000 resumes have been posted, according to Valadez. The site recently had about 500 active listings, and this story is a few weeks old at this point. Quote, we're also seeing a massive migration from corporations to smaller businesses. As we were discussing, I think, a few segments ago with some folks from Maine, the guy just lost his job. It's like, well, if you're looking for work and you want more flexibility, you're going to have to look outside of the mega corporations, because the bigger the company, the more obedient they're going to be to the government, the less flexible that they're going to be.
Yeah, you can expect the McDonald's or something like that to be willing to, take on the federal government. They just want their employees to do what their employees are told. So it's really cool that there's an entire sort of a monster, or Indeed, or whatever people are using to find jobs these days, that is seeking to connect people who need employees to people who want to work.
NoVaxMandate.org. I've not been there to check it out, but yeah, that's exactly what people need. It sort of reminds me of, there was another website, and again, I don't remember what it was, which was listing businesses that weren't requiring people to have a mask on.
Oh, that's right, there was.
It was like a map, and you could put in your area and see where you could go that's not going to give you a hassle. And you know what? That's great. It's the market taking action and saying, look, if you're being discriminated against based on your medical preferences, then you can just go over here or over there, and then the right businesses get the business. That's great.
And that's a really good way of handling it. I hate all of the Yelp bombing and stuff like that that's been going on as a result of these mask mandates, and whether or not
you mean where people will talk trash about a business for not requiring X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, and encouraging other people to do it. Like they'll post on Facebook, hey, this restaurant isn't requiring people to wear masks. Go and give them a bad review on Yelp. Dude, you haven't eaten there.
Oh, yeah, it's awful. That's an awful thing to do.
Yes. Yeah. If you haven't eaten at a place and don't have an actual customer experience with them to rate them on, don't rate them.
That's fraud.
That is fraud.
Yeah.
Probably not pursuable, but you are claiming to have eaten at a place. Just don't go there if it bothers you. That's what the point of the Yelp review is for.
Yeah, these people who are doing those sorts of things, they just don't care. They don't mind being fraudulent. They don't mind spitting in somebody's face. They really do. A lot of them don't even look at us as humans. I've seen posts like that online of people saying, I don't think they're even humans anymore. Seriously.
I believe it. I mean, we were called manslaughterers more than almost 2 years ago at this point. Coming up, we're going to talk about The Matrix, though, and how TikTok seems to be screwing teens up, or teens are getting screwed up because of TikTok.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it. And once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world. So I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here. And I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, where you can join the show, talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And our YouTube chat is still just blowing up with haters, and it's still disappointing because I'm shocked we're still on YouTube. They're regularly kicking us off, suspending us. We've been suspended from Twitch in the past. And I don't think DLive has ever suspended us, but ultimately...
There was an issue that we had with them at one time.
Okay. Ultimately, all of these platforms will suspend us, except Odyssey. You can find our channel there at video.freetalklive.com. There, they only censor people for like pornography and stuff like that you're not going to find here on Free Talk Live. So it's not an issue there. Even when we did the Topless Wednesdays episodes with an all-female cast. The Odyssey didn't really have anything to say about it. Hey, can you not make the thumbnail topless girls? That sucks because that's kind of the point to get people to click it. But I can understand where they're coming from at least.
Yep.
Some people are just trying to browse content at work, and they don't need their boss to walk by and see topless girls. Okay, fair point. But video.freetalklive.com is where you can find our channel. And even if, for whatever reason, Odyssey does kick us off there, it's not really going to affect things because we're still on Library, which is the decentralized blockchain-based protocol that Odyssey is built on. If you really want to get all into it, check out Library. That's LBRY. It's an awesome application allowing you to actually share content directly with others. All of that and more, video.freetalklive.com will take you directly there. Was there more about this story from companies and unvaccinated workers?
I mean, we kind of made the point that there's a website, No Vax Mandate, I think.
It's a neat little website.
Oh, you checked it out?
No.
No.
But
Okay.
it sounds like a neat little website.
Gotcha.
Sorry. I mean, it's fulfilling a need that both employers and employees have.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
The other story was from the Wall Street Journal, just about how requirements are loosening up. It used to be a real process, before COVID to try to get a job. There was the application, and then there was the forms, and then there's the tests, and then there's the, all kinds of hoop jumping to get hired at even just, the most basic corporations like Walmart.
I mean, if they really wanted to hire people, cutting the training sessions would probably be a more efficient way of doing it.
Well, now beauty product retailer The Body Shop is dropping any educational requirements that they had and background checks for job applicants.
That's impressive.
Yeah, UPS is making some job offers in as little as 10 minutes, and CVS no longer requires college graduates to submit their grades. In a labor market where job openings outnumber applicants, companies are brainstorming how to get more candidates in the door and to the floor. The hiring overhaul signifies a potentially broad rethink of job qualifications, a change that could help millions of people enter jobs that were previously out of reach, according to economists.
Sounds like a positive development.
Yeah, and then they talk about the unemployment rate that has fallen ostensibly, but of course we know that the unemployment rate doesn't include people that aren't looking for a job.
They have to be doing something else to muddy the numbers at this point because the number of help wanted signs is not going down.
No, it's not.
So how could unemployment possibly be going down?
Well, the numbers are being muddied because the unemployment numbers don't include people who aren't looking for work. So there's a bunch of people.
But they didn't include that like 2 years ago, right?
That's right. So, but there are more people now who are not looking for work, right? So 2 years ago, people were still looking for work when they were without a job. Now they're just taking welfare, I guess. It's still not really clear what all these people are doing, given that some of the welfare has been cut off in a lot of places. And as I understand, New Hampshire is one of those ones that did not extend the unemployment welfare benefits, but yet there's still hiring signs everywhere.
And New Hampshire has like one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, even now, where it's something like 2.4% or something like that.
It is, 2.7 or something like that, yeah.
Was there a mass exodus out of New Hampshire or something that no one knows about?
Has gained numbers. There was a recent published list of all the states and how many people have moved there. I don't know if it was in the last year or the last 2 years, but it was Florida and Texas, of course, were the two biggies as far as migrants were concerned.
That's good. That's a good place for conservatives to go.
Yeah, and then California and New York were the two losers. They were the ones losing the most people. And
Not
New Hampshire
surprising.
was in the positives. It was in I think it was like 13,000 people and change moved to New Hampshire.
I wonder how many of those were free staters. It had to be a fair number. But there's something weird going on with the unemployment rates, and I mean, that's obvious if you just take a stroll down any main street throughout the United States and you think, oh yeah, they're saying the unemployment is the same now as it was 3 years ago when all of these places didn't have help wanted signs. Something's off.
A lot has changed, they say, since the aftermath of the 2008-09 recession, when high unemployment and a flood of applicants provided companies with their pick of candidates.
Yeah, now the opposite is true.
Right. Many employers raised job qualifications, for instance, asking for bachelor's degrees for IT help desk jobs and construction supervisors, work historically held by high school graduates. Some bumped up minimum work experience requirements. And new data from the labor market analytics firm EMSI Burning Glass and the Conference Board, a private research group, suggests that 1.4 million jobs will open to people without college degrees in the next 5 years if employers continue to lower educational requirements at the current rate. In January of 2019, 42% of employment ads for insurance sales agents required a bachelor's degree, according to data. As of September of this year, only 26% of those same applications or requirements had the same mandate.
I love this because unemployment, when you think about it, all it really means is that there are more workers than we have jobs, right? That's essentially what it means. So some people have to be unemployed, which means if a person wants that job, they have to compete with other unemployed people in order to get it.
Theoretically.
But if unemployment is a thing, then overemployment must also be a thing, where there are too many jobs and not enough workers, in which case the whole situation, the power dynamic becomes inverted, and you have employers and companies competing with each other in order to get workers.
Yeah, there's never been a better time to be a worker.
No. And the minimum wage is always the reason this has always been the reason that I oppose the minimum wage, because it creates this price floor on the value of labor, which means you're going to end up with a surplus of labor, a surplus of employees relative to the number of jobs there are. You're going to end up with unemployment by definition as a result of the price floor that is the minimum wage. So instead of abolishing that, which also would have solved the problem, we have this whatever economic situation is being created that is causing employees to be like, hey, look, we have to offer these people more and we have to lower our standards on what these people are.
Employers
it's a wonderful thing.
And economists are divided over whether the changes are temporary. The vice president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce says when you have a labor market like this, it's not uncommon for employers to start relaxing hiring requirements. When the market tightens up and they can reintroduce some of those requirements, that tends to happen, he said. But on the other hand, a shrinking American workforce could recast hiring practices. The U.S. labor force has declined by millions since the COVID-19 pandemic, and some economists say workforce participation rates will never return to pre-pandemic levels. At the same time, more employers have reconsidered the value of college degree requirements, focused instead on skill-based hiring. And if that's one of the things that comes out of this, I think that's fantastic, because college has been historically a complete waste of time, at least in my lifetime, and at least for most people, unless you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, in which case you have to have a degree. But for the average person, going through college is just a money sink. It's a way for them to get into debt slavery and a way for them to be controlled by the man because of that debt slavery as soon as they get out of school, and many of whom don't actually end up with jobs in their degree that they received. So it's a complete waste in that particular case.
It is. I mean, I have a degree in IT, and what I do now has almost nothing to do with IT. It's been useful to have that degree in IT, but ultimately nothing.
You could have gotten a certification and still been
it's equivalent to an A+ certification, probably. But I mean, really, the skills that I always needed in order to do IT, or the skills that I need in order to do this, they're really no more involved or extensive than what your average gaming enthusiast is going to pick up just because they want to build their own gaming PC or forward a port for their own server or whatever. So hiring people based off skills, I would prefer there be certification systems as well, because all of these, it's not important whether or not you spent 8 years learning it. It's far more important whether or not you can actually do the thing that you're claiming to have spent a bunch of time learning.
Now, companies absorbing workers with little experience may have to spend more time on training, and some of the newly hired may find they don't like the work. Yet in the tight labor market, businesses already struggling with employee turnover may have little choice. And again, if you don't like your job, there's no better time to take a walk than right now, right?
And people are doing it.
A lot of people, there's a lot of people who live paycheck to paycheck, and they feel like they can't leave their jobs because, well, it used to be hard to find other work. Now that's not the case. Now it's super easy. If you want to go line up that other job before you quit the current job, you can do it.
And ghost your employer. There's no reason not to. They're going to be upset about it, but think about the last time that you applied to a place. They said, we promise we'll call you and let you know next week. And then they never do. So don't feel bad about ghosting your employer. 603-283-6160.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone? You forgot to download our archive? and you have no data connection, you can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denzelo. Russia has ordered the closure of the country's longest-running civil and human rights group, International Memorial. The Supreme Court closed it after prosecutors labelled the organisation a public threat, backed by Western countries to draw attention to Soviet-era crimes. Memorial was founded to remember victims of that period of Russian history, millions of whom were imprisoned and executed. Meanwhile, Russia and the US will hold security talks on January 10th. Confirmation comes amid tension with Ukraine and demands from Russia over NATO expansion. FSN's Julia Chapman has more.
The new year will bring a flurry of diplomatic efforts to reach a rapprochement with Russia over security concerns. The West accuses Moscow of a substantial military buildup around Ukraine. Amid rising tensions, Russia issued a series of demands about NATO's presence in Europe. It wants the military bloc to promise not to expand eastwards and to limit military activity in countries bordering Russia. In the second week of January, Russian negotiators will meet with US, NATO and European counterparts to put forward its demands in person. Officials say Moscow's concerns will be heard, but the two sides are coming from drastically different positions. Julia Chapman, Moscow.
The charity Save the Children has blamed Myanmar's military for the deaths of 2 of its staff members. It says more than 35 people were killed in an attack in the east of the country, and the organisation has called on the United Nations Security Council to take action. The US has halved the self-isolation time for those testing positive for COVID-19 in an attempt to get people back to work quicker. As the Omicron variant spreads across the country, staff shortages have caused disruption, in particular for airlines. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reduced the recommended isolation time for asymptomatic patients from 10 to 5 days. Industries have been impacted with more people needing to isolate amid a surge in Omicron cases. Airlines have cancelled thousands of flights over the last few days, another 700 in the US on Tuesday. But some health experts have criticised the lack of testing at the end of the isolation period. The US is struggling to keep up with the spike in people needing testing, despite promises by the government to provide 500 million at-home test kits. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Children will return to New York City classrooms in the new year despite a surge in COVID-19 cases. When a positive case is recorded in a New York City public school classroom, the entire class will no longer have to switch to temporary remote learning. Instead, the city will provide all students with at-home testing kits, and they'll be allowed to return to in-person learning, provided those tests are negative and they're asymptomatic. From bureaus worldwide, This is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, more memories of Desmond Tutu, who died over the weekend at the age of 90. Today's come from John Carlin, the former South Africa bureau chief for The Independent, recalling Archbishop Tutu's stewardship of a funeral for 48 people massacred by apartheid-era security forces in June 1992.
There was a township outside Johannesburg called Boipatong, where 48 people were massacred one day. The amazing thing was that he wept, and he absolutely sort of tapped into the sorrow and indeed the anger of the people, but at the same time he managed also to inject some humor into the proceedings. Only Tutu could pull this off. He had this sort of perfect judgment of tone, and at one point in the speech, after weeping and expressing all the sorrow of the people's deaths, he said, look, how ridiculous, not only how unjust, but how ridiculous this apartheid system is. What if, instead of discriminating against people because of the color of their skin, they'd chosen to discriminate against people with big noses, like mine? And he sort of went off on this sort of whole diatribe about the absurdity of the whole thing of selecting skin color as opposed to other physical characteristics to discriminate against people the way apartheid so systematically and horribly did. And smiles came to people's faces. And again, he defused the tension.
Tomorrow, further memories of Archbishop Tutu from veteran South African journalist John Battersby. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo.
A dead iPod is remembered as expensive. It's the Onion Radio News. This is Doyle Redland reporting. Despite heroic efforts at resuscitation, a third-generation 30-gigabyte iPod, serial number AP356372, was pronounced dead early this morning at the age of 2. The iPod's closest companion, Sarah Zartman, says she'll never forget the great music it used to play, nor will she forget the nearly $500 price tag.
I'll remember those 3,500 songs as long as I live. That iPod was convenient, portable, and really pricey.
Zartman added that had she known the iPod's lithium-ion battery would have such a short lifespan, she might have spent more time listening to it. AP356372 is survived by a BlackBerry. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talking about COVID-19 and what employers are having to do in order to actually acquire employees. They need bodies. They need people willing to work for them, and they need a large pool of candidates from which to choose their employees. 603-283-6160 if you want to weigh in on that, or talk about whatever is important to you. That's 603-283-6160. And with you tonight is Arya and Ian. And Ian, you said it goes into some examples of just how drastically they've lowered some of their standards. Of course, some of the stuff we were talking about was like, okay, we're going to reduce it from like a bachelor's degree to maybe just an associate's, or...
No, a lot of them are absolutely getting rid of college requirements.
Yeah, and
a lot of places.
I love that idea. Being a college graduate who, like you, it's been totally useless to me throughout, other than the one time that I was able to use my college degree to get my foot in a door at an IT firm. It's never been useful to me. And nothing I learned there has ever been useful.
And now it's less useful than it's ever been. In fact, CVS, according to the story over at Wall Street Journal, scrapped requirements for even a high school diploma or the equivalent for most entry-level roles. And that's always something you could lie about if you were on a job application, because they never check.
Yeah, they're not going to check to see whether or not you graduated high school.
Yeah, no one
a lot of
checks
these
that.
places don't actually check to see whether you went to the college that you claim to have gone to. And that's why a lot of these sex offenders and stuff like that end up getting hired as school teachers without any qualifications.
The company also no longer requires grade point averages when recruiting college students. The VP of Talent Acquisition at CBS likened their recruiting approach to that of a NASCAR team, stripping out every unnecessary element that slows down the race car. He says if it's not needed, you cut it out. The company found that a higher grade point average, here's a shocker, didn't always equate to better job performance. So why are we using it? He said. So now they're not. CBS in recent years also expanded its use of virtual job tryouts for customer-facing roles. Now, I don't know what that means. Is that like VR or something? Is it like the job simulator on VR? The aim of the role-playing exercise is to give entry-level applicants a realistic view of the work and to let hiring managers assess their aptitude, and that made it easier to cut the high school education requirement. He said,
so they would have a Zoom meeting and they would role-play having a customer service experience or something.
What do you do if you see a customer do this? Maybe that was what it was. He says if you can pass the virtual job tryout, then why isn't that good enough? He says it is good enough. Going on, Darden Restaurants, which is the owner of Olive Garden and some other companies, rolled out a new tool to allow people to apply for a job and schedule an interview at a restaurant within 5 minutes. Waste Management Incorporated retooled their job application for truck drivers and others and now takes 3 minutes to fill out instead of what it used to be as long as an hour.
Oh, thank God. I mean, this is a positive development. I've applied for some jobs throughout my life, and having to fill out the 70-question personality questionnaire.
Oh, yeah. They want to see how obedient you are.
Yeah, that crap had to go, man, because it shouldn't take more. And then you'd have to attach your resume and then give them all the data that is listed there on your resume and 10 years of work history. It's just completely obnoxious.
Now it's, can you fog a mirror? All right, you're hired. The goal is to prevent potential hires from walking away, right? Like if it's too long of an application, people are just going to say, screw this, I can go work over here for get the job right away. Quote, if an application gets complicated or complex, they drop it. They're not interested, said the vice president of talent development at Waste Management. Southwest Airlines is making on-the-spot offers for ramp workers and other positions. Chief Executive Gary Kelly said on a call with analysts the company had turned to new hiring techniques, looking to hire thousands of people this fall and thousands more next year. At UPS, human resources executives realized months ago the company would need to streamline hiring practices if they hope to bring on more holiday workers. And after study, UPS eliminated job application questions and hiring steps unless they were required for payroll purposes and government audits, according to their hiring guy. To broaden the applicant pool, they eliminated extended questions about the applicant's employment history. So they got rid of that for seasonal
thank goodness,
jobs.
because you don't need to know where I worked 10 years ago to know whether or not I'm qualified to work at Walmart or McDonald's or CVS or wherever.
Human resources executives tallied the number of trips job seekers made to company buildings before landing an offer, seeking another way to lower the hiring hurdles. A 2-week process for seasonal workers at UPS now takes less than 30 minutes in certain cases. For some jobs, such as a driver helper, there's no interview at all. Applicants answer online questions and can get a conditional job offer in as little as 10 minutes. Successful applicants hear from a UPS employee after they pass the online screening. They're welcomed to UPS and told where to report for work. Their hiring guy says, quote, in the market that we're in, if you don't make a job offer to someone somewhat quickly, someone else will.
These are all positive developments. A 2-week interview period or application period.
Just for a seasonal job.
Yeah, for a seasonal job at UPS. Man, that is insane.
Yeah. Now, they are a union shop at UPS, so who knows what that brings into the picture.
Still, it's good to see a lot of these restrictions going away.
Yeah.
The workplace history one's definitely ones that needed to go. The 70 to 100 question personality questionnaire, I really hope that's gone as well, because that is always the worst, man. And some of them present you with choices that are just absolutely ridiculous, and there's no good answer.
And some of them are getting rid of drug testing, which is a huge change to get rid of that.
I mean, that seems like a no-brainer, right?
It does, but it's one
drug
of those...
addicts need money to buy drugs.
Well, but it's one of those things that's been just kind of around for decades. Like, the war on drugs was going hot and heavy, and corporations had to show the government how, they're playing their part to keep drug users from actually having meaningful, work and employment. And so these things have been around forever. They're just costly to companies. It costs money to do drug tests on potential applicants. The applicant doesn't pay the fee for that, and it just takes more time and gets in the way. And you're cutting out a bunch of potentially productive individuals. Just because someone tests positive for a drug doesn't mean that they're a drug addict. It just means that they've used it at some point.
And I have no issue, with coworkers or employees or whatever who they like doing coke on weekends. Okay, cool. It's your weekend. Do what you want.
Hey, just don't do. All you got to do is say, look, we don't care what you do at home. Yeah. Just don't do a drug before you get on the forklift. That kind of thing, right?
It seems like common sense, but employers are finally figuring out some of this stuff, it would seem. It's a little too late for a lot of them, but they still need bodies, so they're going to do what they can to get those bodies in the door.
Well, it's interesting that, it's competition that is making this happen. These people are competing for employees. They're competing for workers, and that is what is leading to this constant reassessment of, okay, how can we make this process better? How can we make it smoother? How can we make it more friendly for the applicants? We want to be the easiest hire in the town because that's how desperate they are.
And I'm thrilled to see it, and I'm thrilled to see that, potential employees, they have these options in front of them where, okay, I've applied to these 7 different jobs. All of them want to hire me. Which one am I going to actually take?
Yeah, that's a nice feeling.
Because it's not just a matter of being the first one to offer the job at this point. You also have to offer the best job.
The best deal.
And the best deal. And not all of them are going to be able to do that, but the employees finally can say, hey, look, yeah, I want this job. And they look at these other 6 employees that offered them jobs, and they think, you know what? I'm not going to call them and let them know I've taken another job because they don't deserve it.
And this is also a kind of a sink or swim situation, right? Like if you can't find enough people to work, you can't open your doors and you're going to go out of business. So this is a critical task for these companies. And if they can't compete, they're done for.
Well, they more than likely they can compete. The question is whether or not they're going to choose to, or whether they're just going to throw their arms.
What are they going to do when no one shows up to work? I mean, the 24-hour, one of the 24-hour gas stations in town, not the one that was closed that I'd never seen closed before, but I think you told me it was Cumbies. That no, maybe it wasn't you.
I've never seen Cumbies closed.
They stopped being 24 hours.
Really?
Now, maybe they're back to it. I don't know. But according to a mutual friend of ours, he said that 4 of the employees had to, they got sick or they were, for whatever reason, not able to go to work, and they just didn't have the people. So they had to stop being 24 hours.
That's what a lot of these places have done. A lot of these restaurants close early because they just don't have the people to stay open, or the people who are there are just exhausted. They're cutting hours. They need more bodies, and this seems like the best way of getting them. Lowering their standards a bit and allowing, finally, a system where employees are able to choose the job that suits them rather than the other way around. And hopefully they can come to some sort of mutually beneficial arrangement rather than this more parasitic one we've seen from employers in the last few decades. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
There are basically 2 types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
When Monster Hunter International discovers one of Isaac Newton's wardstones being auctioned off, they decide to steal it and use it to destroy the Chaos God once and for all. But a mysterious thief upends their plan, and it soon becomes a race against time as something much older and infinitely more evil awakens in the jungles of South America. Monster Hunter Bloodlines by New York Times bestselling author Larry Correia and Baen Books. Visit monsterhunternation.com for more.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealestate.com Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it.
Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
The easiest thing in the world for a reader to do is to stop reading, according to the late, great Barney Kilgore, who became managing editor of the Wall Street Journal in 1941 and grew the paper's circulation from 33,000 to 1 million by the 60s. And he'd be pleased to know that his paper is one of the few that people now pay to read online. Someone else pre-internet who realized that attention is fragile? Motown Records founder Berry Gordy. In the early 60s, when his label dominated the charts, he'd bring a dozen real people into the Hitsville, USA studios and audition songs. And he'd ask, if you were down to your last dollar, would you spend it on this record or would you buy a sandwich? Today, attention span seems like an oxymoron. For tips on cutting through the clutter, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, where you're invited to take control of the airwaves and talk about whatever is important to you. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to weigh in. Again, that number is 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And I want to say thank you to Matthew, who is tonight's amplifier. This means that Matthew is a member of the new AMPS program. That's our new Patreon. You can find it at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. It stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. So if you like the show, you may consider doing what Matthew here has done and sign up for our Patreon over at amps.freetalklive.com. It does come with a number of cool little perks, but really the reason you should join is because you like the show and you want to show your support. That's the best way to do it. amps.freetalklive.com. Now, I wanted to get into it a bit last night, and we didn't because we had a lot of interesting callers to get to, but there is this huge narrative that's being just put forward everywhere I turn about how the Matrix movies are allegories for being trans. Like, I found this on MSNBC yesterday, and it's still there as their little clickbait headline part of it is, what transgender viewers always knew about that red pill in the Matrix. So obviously, as a trans person who has seen the Matrix, when I see that headline, I think, okay, well, I must know this then, right? So I decided to put that to the test and rewatch the Matrix movies, and we talked about that a bit last night.
We did, yeah.
And there's no evidence whatsoever that either of the Wachowski sisters have ever said that the movies are about being trans.
Despite all the headlines proclaiming that they have.
Yes, that's been the issue, and we've seen this countless times throughout the years here on Free Talk Live of a clickbait headline that doesn't actually have anything, that doesn't actually...
Sometimes is the opposite of what is said in the article.
Yes, and it's not exactly the opposite that's said here, but in reality, what Lily Wachowski says, one of the two Wachowski sisters, one of the people who
the one
wrote
who didn't do the new movie.
Yes.
Right.
For whatever reason. But she said that she doesn't know how much being trans affected her writing the original Matrix trilogies.
Yeah.
Which means that it's not, at least intentionally, an allegory for being trans, which means
It was not conscious in any way.
Yes. So whatever people are reading there, they're putting it there, and it wasn't intentionally put there by the Wachowski sisters. The one example that would have been great was the character Switch, who, as we talked about last night, was a male in the real world and a female in the Matrix. And that's where a lot of this confusion comes in, because the quotes that they used from Lily Wachowski about this matter, she uses a lot of pronouns like that and it, instead of referring to what she's actually referring to. So she'll say, oh, I'm really glad that came out. And the articles will make it sound like she's saying that she's glad it came out, that the movies are really about being trans. But if you look more closely into it, she's saying
talking about the character Switch.
She's glad that the original intent about Switch came out. They've even said, we're glad that people are viewing this movie in this new lens because it proves that art isn't static, meaning that viewing it through this lens changes it from how it was originally viewed. And people are commenting constantly, why are you so bothered by this? I'm bothered by this because you're sharing something that is demonstrably false. Here's the screenshot from the very article you shared about it.
That you just told me to read, this person.
Yes.
The person tells you, hey, you should read this article. And you're saying, yeah, I actually did read the article, and this is what I learned.
But it doesn't matter. That headline is enough for these people, and nothing can change their minds about it. And it frustrates me as someone who really loved at least the original Matrix movie. I didn't care much for 2 and 3, but the first one was a masterpiece. It's got so much hidden within it, so much philosophy, biblical references, other religious references. It's just filled to the brim with this stuff. To take all of that, just like, yeah, screw all that. None of that symbolism is actually important. The only thing that's important here is that the directors are trans now. And no, all of that other stuff is what makes the Matrix awesome.
That must be frustrating for them. And from what I've read, and I've not read, Bonnie was doing a lot of research on them last night, but from what I've read, they're supposedly very private people. So, for instance, you cannot find Lana Wachowski. She does not have a Twitter account. The one that appears to be her is a fake. It's not actually her. Lily does have one, and Lily's account actually in the little About Me section says, not on the new Matrix film, so stop asking me. So maybe she's a little bit frustrated with Warner Brothers, or who knows what's behind that.
Let's talk about that. Because
but the point I wanted to make is how frustrating that must be for these creators who put so much time and loving effort into 3 and now a 4th film, but the 2 were co-directors and writers on the first 3. They put so much of their lives into these movies. Now to just have them reduced by people to say, oh, it's just all about being trans, and no, it's about a whole lot of things. Like, can't you see that? No, it's just trans. Say these people. It's like, no,
it has to be frustrating for them, and I mean, they have a delicate position to walk here where they can't just come out and say, no, that didn't have anything to do with the movie, because obviously on some level it would have, right? Every creator,
even if it's subconscious.
Yeah, every creator puts some part of themselves into their creation. So they can't just come out and say, no, there's nothing in there about being trans. And I thought initially that Lena, the sister who did write and direct the new movie, had come out and disagreed with her sister, because there is a statement from Lana saying something to the effect of, look, there may be bits and pieces in there that were inspired by the trans struggle, but it's not a trans movie. I was like, okay, well, Lily was wrong enough that it prompted Lana to come out and say, hey, no, that's not actually true. But then I dug into the articles, and it turns out Lily didn't even say what the headlines are proclaiming that she said in the first place. So it's got to be tremendously frustrating given the impact the Matrix movies have had and the genius levels of philosophical reference that went into them. It's got to be frustrating to have that just swept away and reduced to just being about trans.
So you watched the new one last night.
I did, and you mentioned Warner Brothers, which I have to say, the first 10 minutes of the movie were just nothing but a take that at Warner Brothers for anyone who was paying attention to it. It was shocking. There's going to be some spoilers here. I wasn't happy to see You want me to?
I mean, if you can avoid it,
okay,
try to, because this is still a pretty new movie.
True. So there were some parts of the setup that I didn't care for because of nostalgia and like, no, this isn't the way things are supposed to be, right? But once I got past that, I really enjoyed the movie. But like at one point they say, basically, look, well, Warner Brothers owns The Matrix, and they say there's going to be a new trilogy, whether we're a part of it or not.
Yeah, there's the term, of course, that's being thrown around is it's meta, it's self-referential.
Well, it very obviously was.
And it has a lot of fun with that. But it does make you wonder. It seems pretty clear from the things that they say in the first third of the movie that Warner Brothers was going to make this movie with or without them. And it sounds to me like Lily said, screw you, I'm not going to get involved. But Lana said, all right, well, I'll figure something out, and I'll help you with this, and we'll put this together.
And man, did she figure something out. It was creative, it was clever, and I would say it's at least the second best Matrix movie.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Maybe on a second viewing I would change my opinion about it, but we can talk more about it.
We're going to talk more about that coming up. I've also seen people saying, well, but it's flopped at the blockbuster or the box office, so there won't be another movie. Dude, yes, there will. There will be a fifth, and there will be a sixth movie.
I think it pulled in like 70 million worldwide, so I'm not going to call that a flop, but US I think was like 20 something.
Well, they spent like 200 million making it and then another 100 million marketing, but it's still, it's The Matrix. There'll be a fifth. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
If you want to bring more liberty into your community, there's something you should see. Intercoin, the movement you might want to join. If you like Bitcoin, break through. It's true. It's truly something new. If you'd like to see real prosperity, start your own currency, boost the economy. Intercoin, the movement you might want to join. If you like Bitcoin, its impact's hard to overstate, results you can appreciate. If you're tired of relying on the state, want to make your own community great, homelessness and hunger to eliminate, let the wealth accumulate. Don't wait for the growth rate to accelerate. Go to intercoin.org and get the coins for yourself.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denzelo. Russia has ordered the closure of the country's longest-running civil and human rights group, International Memorial. The Supreme Court closed it after prosecutors labelled the organisation a public threat, backed by Western countries to draw attention to Soviet-era crimes. Memorial was founded to remember victims of that period of Russian history, millions of whom were imprisoned and executed. Meanwhile, Russia and the US will hold security talks on January 10th. Confirmation comes amid tension with Ukraine and demands from Russia over NATO expansion. FSN's Julia Chapman has more.
The new year will bring a flurry of diplomatic efforts to reach a rapprochement with Russia over security concerns. The West accuses Moscow of a substantial military buildup around Ukraine. Amid rising tensions, Russia issued a series of demands about NATO's presence in Europe. It wants the military bloc to promise not to expand eastwards and to limit military activity in countries bordering Russia. In the second week of January, Russian negotiators will meet with US, NATO and European counterparts to put forward its demands in person. Officials say Moscow's concerns will be heard, but the two sides are coming from drastically different positions. Julia Chapman, Moscow.
The charity Save the Children has blamed Myanmar's military for the deaths of two of its staff members. It says more than 35 people were killed in an attack in the east of the country, and the organisation has called on the United Nations Security Council to take action. The US has halved the self-isolation time for those testing positive for COVID-19 in an attempt to get people back to work quicker. As the Omicron variant spreads across the country, staff shortages have caused disruption, in particular for airlines. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reduced the recommended isolation time for asymptomatic patients from 10 to 5 days. Industries have been impacted with more people needing to isolate amid a surge in Omicron cases. Airlines have cancelled thousands of flights over the last few days, another 700 in the US on Tuesday. But some health experts have criticised the lack of testing at the end of the isolation period. The US is struggling to keep up with the spike in people needing testing, despite promises by the government to provide 500 million at-home test kits. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
Children will return to New York City classrooms in the new year despite a surge in COVID-19 cases. When a positive case is recorded in a New York City public school classroom, the entire class will no longer have to switch to temporary remote learning. Instead, the city will provide all students with at-home testing kits, and they'll be allowed to return to in-person learning, provided those tests are negative and they're asymptomatic. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160 if you'd like to weigh in. Have you seen the new Matrix movies? We're trying to keep it spoiler-free here. I didn't expect to be doing that, so there's a lot more that I want to say about the movie that I can't because it would involve giving away spoilers, and I don't want to do that. I didn't realize that the movie had just come out like a week ago, I guess. So I thought I was sort of more on the tail end of it, like when I finally actually got around to seeing Free Guy or whatever it was. It had been in the theaters for a fair bit.
Yeah, no, this hasn't even been out for a week. It came out last Wednesday.
603-283-6160 if you'd like to weigh in. We just got into the subject of the new Matrix movie, and it did have some fantastic lines. I would imagine that it was ultimately Lana coming around and saying, okay, look, they're going to make this movie either way. I understand you don't want to have any involvement with it, but they're going to butcher it if we lead them to their own devices. Have you seen any of the other remakes and reboots they've done throughout the last 20 years? Very few of them have been good. I think
you don't want to see your creation butchered.
No. And I think Halloween is probably the one example I can think of where something that was as good as the originals came out. Followed by, I would say now, The Matrix Resurrection, which I didn't expect to be good. I had no intention of even watching it simply because it had resurrections in the title. And if you want to turn me off a movie, that's the way to do it. That's like saying, hey, we're totally out of ideas here. If resurrections. But it fits. I would have been happier if they doesn't like reboot it or something. But obviously it's not
Reloaded.
Yeah, and it's not a reboot of the series. It's part of the series. So
it is. But the critics love to call this a reboot. Like I've read a few reviews since I
it can't possibly be a reboot though because it constantly.
I agree with you.
It's built off the originals.
It's a sequel. It's absolutely a sequel. But the critics just love using that term. Anytime a movie hasn't had a sequel in 2 decades, they just love to say, oh, it's also a reboot in addition to being a sequel. It's like, no, it's not.
No, it's a resurrection of the series. It's a continuation of the original plot line.
Now,
that's
honestly,
not a reboot.
I hope it doesn't become a trilogy. I really don't want it to keep going.
I had the impression that they didn't deal with most of the problems that needed to be dealt with. So at the end of the movie, I was like, okay, awesome. Can't wait for the next movie to come out.
Maybe. It'll be interesting to see which direction they go with this. One of the things that was cool about this movie, I like the movie. I don't want to say it was a bad movie, but then again, I also like the second and third Matrix movies, and most people didn't seem to really care for those. I thought they were fine continuations of the plot, and they made sense in their place. Obviously, you cannot reach the level of the original Matrix. That is an impossible task. It is one of those things. Like the thing you want to do with a sequel is try to outdo the previous movie, and almost no sequel can ever achieve that. If you look at the history of sequels, it's very easy. It's a very short list when you can actually come up with lists, sequels that have actually surpassed their predecessor. And there's only a few of them out there. Aliens, maybe, and Terminator 2, And there really
those are good examples.
There really aren't that many other ones out there. So I think you have to watch the second and third movies with that in mind. Of that, you're never going to have your mind blown.
I think Gremlins 2 and the original 2? Ghostbusters was better than the second one. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, Ghostbusters 2 is basically just a retread of the first Ghostbusters in a lot of ways. But anyway, I thought they did as good as they could have with this particular film. There was one thing that I really wanted to see addressed that it didn't address, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say what wasn't in the movie. And I'm interested in your opinion about this, Arya, as somebody who's relatively a fan of the first three.
I like all three of them. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah.
Did you get the impression at any point that the Matrix, when the architect in I think the second or the third film, that character that's the programmer basically,
I think he's the
Matrix,
end of the second film. I think
he's in both of them actually, but I think he has the conversation with Neo in the second film. And he talks about how he's been there before, that Neo has been there before. In fact, in the background in that scene, you can see what are ostensibly the previous Neos and their previous reactions to the conversation that is being had now in that particular movie for what he says is the sixth time. He talks about how the machines have destroyed Zion.
They talked about how the whole one thing is part of the system in order to stabilize it, that there was always going to be an anomaly.
Yes.
And that so
and
they had
balancing an equation.
Yeah, and they had to create a way of dealing with that anomaly when it arose.
But they still say that the one is a human. It's not a program, right? So Keanu Reeves' character is supposedly a human that's born into the Matrix with the ability to change things, right? With the ability to restructure, etc. But he refers to the idea that this has already happened 6 other times, that Zion has been destroyed. He says we've gotten exceedingly efficient at it. And so if that's the case, and if there were previous iterations of Neo who were also identical to Keanu Reeves, then does that suggest that Reeves is a clone and that they keep remaking him and putting him back into every new iteration of the Matrix? And
I don't think so, because as I understood it from the third movie, and it's been years since I watched it.
I just watched them last week.
Wasn't there something super special about this version of the one that allowed him to actually, or it was because Agent Smith became corrupted as well, and the machines had no way of dealing with that particular anomaly.
Yeah, and so Neo cut a deal with the machines to say he'll take care of Smith if you have peace. So that was the 6th time or 7th or whichever time it was. That was the time that peace happened because of the choices that Neo made. So the Neos have made, or this most recent Neo made a different choice.
Well, the original Neos didn't have an Agent Smith to deal with.
And they didn't have a Trinity, supposedly, either, because this Neo was in love and the previous Neos weren't. So that might have been another factor. But the point I'm trying to make here, or that I'm asking about, is if there were 6 previous Neos, well, obviously, he's a young guy in the movie, right? Like the character himself is no more than 20-something years old. He's very young.
Right.
So it wasn't child Neo that went and talked to the architect. So when they destroy Zion and they restart this whole thing, the big question is Zion in the Matrix? Is the Zion quote-unquote real world just another level of the Matrix?
That's a good question, because otherwise you do have the question of, okay, well, if they've already destroyed Zion, then where are the people to populate the next Zion coming from?
Well, he says in the conversation that the one is allowed to choose like 17 women and 6 males or something like that to repopulate Zion, that's part of the whole process.
So the existence of Zion, it may be real, but it's still part of the system in order to keep it stabilized against anomalies like Neo.
But is it real? Because Neo has the ability to affect things, use his powers in the quote-unquote real world to do things like use a plasma wave to stop the Sentinels. Those sorts of scenes suggest that maybe Zion and all that isn't even real at all, that it's just another level for those who want out of the first Matrix.
It could very well be, because that's always the thing I've hated most about the third Matrix movie, is that I'm totally on board with Neo having these superpowers in the Matrix.
Yeah.
But when he's not in the Matrix, no, he can't be blind and still be able to magically see things.
Right. So there's another example of another superpower. But also think about Agent Smith. Remember in the third movie, in the second movie, he escapes from the Matrix by somehow putting himself into a real person from the quote-unquote real world, this other character, Bane.
Oh, I'm going to have to rewatch the third one now because I don't remember that.
He escapes in the second one, and then in the third one he attempts to... That's how Neo goes blind at the end, is Bane attacks him. But Bane is actually Agent Smith. So how is Smith's consciousness still present in this human being if it's the real world and Smith is just a program? So the whole idea that the Matrix, or that the real world in the Matrix is actually part of the Matrix, is the only way to explain all of those things, and that's the one thing they didn't talk about at all in the new movie, and I was bummed by that. I was bummed that they didn't even address that question. Like, how could there be 6 Matrixes and 6 different Neos, and how can he have powers outside of the... So...
Well, as I understand it, there's probably 2 more of these coming, so maybe we'll get those questions answered.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Plus, the action in this one, it just wasn't as good.
No, and it was distinctly different. It wasn't anything like the action scenes in the original Matrix
movies. They had
movies.
a different fight coordinator.
But I would still highly recommend it for anyone who's a fan of the Matrix. I'm saying it's at least second best of the trilogy. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
So you're just not a fan of the gays, then?
Well, I would call it a perversion. I think it's one step towards bestiality.
I think Rich was locked up with a guy who was actually having sex with his dog.
That's right, the dog effer.
Yeah, well, I mean, dogs are property, and I have sex with property all the time, right? So like I want to get your opinion on this, right? So if homosexuality is one step towards bestiality, and then I mean where does it stop? We're just I frequently have sex with a rubber vagina, right, that I bought on eBay, and I wonder if you think that is also like bad.
Where's that on the spectrum?
I would call that a perversion too, as well.
Okay, so I'm going to go to hell then.
So,
I wouldn't go that far.
Am I responsible for the degradation of human society in America, sir?
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Should you be able to earn an honest living free from senseless government interference? The Institute for Justice thinks so. That's why we've spent years defending hard-working men and women from pointless government regulations. Nationwide, IJ has created opportunity by reducing government power, but there is still more work to be done. Visit our website today at ij.org. Let IJ take care of the government so you can take care of your business.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. I want to say thank you to David Zientara, who was last night's amplifier. We didn't have that data together because I suck at doing my job. He is a platinum level amplifier, which means that David is giving $25 per month to the AMPS program. That's amps.freetalklive.com if you want to join it. Of course, as we said, we don't ask $25 per month. $5 per month is all it takes to get you in. So check it out. Thank you, David, for your contributions. amps.freetalklive.com. We're talking about The Matrix here, and one of the things I loved about it was
the new one.
Yes, the new Matrix movie was as they. I don't know how to describe the scene without giving spoilers, so I'm not going to describe it. But they make fourth wall references to the original Matrix trilogy and what it might have been about. And at the same time, you got this hippie song playing. I don't remember exactly the name of the song, but I've heard it before, and I would remember if I heard it. I'd be able to identify it.
I think you're talking about White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah.
That scene. Yeah.
So it's a song about chasing white rabbits, which means wasting your time on a fruitless endeavor that ultimately just leads to a crazy wonderland. For anyone who's ever read Alice in Wonderland.
Well, in the case of Neo's chasing the White Rabbit, it was certainly not a waste of time.
Depends on which interpretation of the new movie you have, I guess.
I mean, I'm going back to the original. I mean, it was Follow the White Rabbit was what started him on his quest.
Yes, but in the context of the new movie, that could have just been him losing his mind in the way that Alice was purported to have.
Yeah, it could be. But
anyway, they make fun of the ideas that, you know, The Matrix, what was it really about? It was about...
Was it a critique of capitalism? Was it a trans allegory? I mean, they really throw it all out there.
They really did. And it's very clear that they're just mocking the idea that the original Matrix trilogy could be boiled down to being about just one particular thing. Because it was far more complicated than that. I mean, if you just look on just the basic Wikipedia page of the Matrix trilogy, you're going to find an entire section dedicated to references to religions and philosophies and all sorts of things like that. And that's without getting into what those places are actually linking to, where you'll find out, oh, there's 1,700 references to Hinduism buried somewhere in these three movies or whatever. But sure, it's just about being trans. But it was very enjoyable. All of the fourth wall stuff I enjoyed. At one point, a character says something to the effect of, we're going to make sure this franchise breaks even or something. And it's just... It's gloriously well done.
Yeah, they have fun with the movie, and it's not to the point of like the more recent Predator movie that came out, The Predator, where
I haven't seen that.
It was basically like so self-aware and so comically bad that it was essentially they took Predator, which is like this super serious macho tough guy series of movies, and they turned it into a ridiculous comedy, and it was still entertaining, but it wasn't at all. It was such a change of pace and change of gear. In this case, this is still a Matrix movie, and it still holds, firm to its Matrixiness, while at the same time having some fun at the expense of some of the fans, at the expense of Warner Brothers, and just doing whatever they wanted to do. It really kind of felt like in this particular case, and I liked it. I thought it was entertaining. My critique of it is, and we touched on this a moment ago, was as far as The Matrix is concerned, when you think about it, the previous three movies, there are some really memorable scenes of like, wow, they put a lot of effort into this fight scene. A lot of effort went into the fight scene on the highway in the second movie, where they actually built their own.
That was the point
highway.
at which I stopped watching recently, because it's just like, okay, I know how the next 30 minutes of this movie is going to be. And sure, it was fun when I watched it back in the 90s or the early 2000s or whatever. I'm like, can we get back to the plot now? at this point.
I was still entertained by it. But those what they call them set pieces in the movie industry, where you've got this big thing happening and it's exciting and action packed and all that. There really wasn't that in this new movie. There were some fight scenes. And, there was some slow-mo and some this and that here and there in the fight scenes, but...
Were there a lot of major fight scenes in the original Matrix movie?
Yeah, there were definitely some.
But were there any of these massive fight scenes? Like you mentioned the one in the second movie.
Yeah, I don't think anything goes to the level in any of the Matrix movies of that highway scene in the second
It is
movie.
memorable.
But there are others where there's a lot of sort of memorable fight scenes or memorable set pieces or like big things that are happening. And this new movie just doesn't have that. The fight scenes are just kind of throwaway. And further, the fight scenes are filmed in a way that it is just not as accessible. Like, it's shaky cam,
It is a lot of that jumping back and forth where you can't tell who's doing what.
Yeah, right. A lot happening, close-ups to where it's hard to really see what the fight is going. What's going on. People are getting fought. There's a fight going on, but it's not really clear what's going on with the fight. So it's a bit of a mess. And then there was something else I noticed.
The fight between Neo and one of the unnamed agents was old Matrix style. The camera was pulled back. You could see who was doing what, but it was also only just those two people.
Okay.
So that scene was very reminiscent of the original Matrix.
The other thing that I noticed, just from a technical aspect, and I noticed it specifically during the fight scenes, because it's a lot of quick motion going on there, was it was filmed in a way that was unpleasant to watch, and it has to do with some sort of setting that they did with their digital cameras. I looked into the technicals behind the movie, and they used the RED cameras, which are a digital filming system, whereas back in the day they were using film. And so that's one difference between the old movies and this new one is technically it was shot in a very different manner, and I don't know what they call it, but it's like, it looks like it's sped up or over. Like there's like too many frames or not enough frames. I'm not sure what the effect is, but it's like it kind of takes me out of it for a moment. It's like, this just doesn't look real, and maybe that was their intention, but it just threw me off during those fight scenes and just wasn't as satisfying as some of the previous movies were in that way.
What are your thoughts about how it seems to demote Neo as, quote, the one to something, as you suggested earlier, which is that this Neo was different because this Neo had Trinity. The new movie sort of creates this idea that it's not Neo by himself who is truly the one, but only when Neo is combined with Trinity.
Yeah, and that is interesting because Neo does mention in this movie, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that essentially that Trinity believing in him was because he didn't believe it himself, but she believed in him. Morpheus believed in him, and that was what led him to actually step into being the one. And of course, he did have Trinity there in the original. And obviously, if you haven't seen it, this is a spoiler. Neo dies in the original toward the end of the movie, and she, through her love for him, brings him back to life.
Yeah,
and so he says in this movie that it's his turn to believe in her. And so that's sort of a bit of a passing of the torch, I think, to some extent, or a teaming up, allowing her to rise to new levels without saying what happens.
See, this is why I think a fifth and sixth movie are inevitable. There's a lot of stuff like that, and
this is a love story. This new movie,
it is, and I'm totally fine with that. Right,
and it works. That really works.
I think it probably works better. The idea of finding some person out there who truly completes you and lifts you up to higher levels or whatever, that's a lot more realistic than, oh no, you're just the chosen one. You're the son of God. You're the savior of all humanity. But finding someone who, just helps bring out the best in you, that's a much more realistic story, I think. So I'm fine if that's what it wants to be about, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are upset by that, but I don't particularly care.
Really? People are upset that this is a love story?
People are upset about everything, man.
Yeah, that's true.
There's always something someone is going to be upset about, especially when it comes to a topic as complex as The Matrix. And, resurrecting a almost 20-year-old series here, I'm looking forward to the potential new movies that are coming. I think they've probably already written out the fifth and sixth movies, and I suspect they probably have already started filming them.
I don't know.
I
think it's going to depend on how this one does.
I don't know, man.
And it's a new...
they kept making new Star Wars movies after the what was it called? The Phantom Menace.
Oh, it was just god-awful.
Yeah, I don't know how it did in the box office, though. Because ultimately,
I suspect that did very well, because everybody wanted to see Star Wars again after 20 years.
That's true. Well, then how did the third one do would be the interesting question. But why isn't The Matrix doing well if not everyone? Because you would expect that same thing here. People want to see Matrix again for the first time in 20 years, but it just doesn't appear to be overwhelmingly successful. At this point, it hasn't broken even, as I understand it.
No, and most movies aren't going to break even their first week out.
Okay.
So
well,
you
that
got
makes
to give
me feel
it,
better.
you got to give it a little bit of time, and it ultimately depends on what it does internationally, not so much just in the United States. And international, from what I saw, I looked at it yesterday. It pulled in like 70 million. I mean, that's not bad for an opening weekend. But then again, that's what you would expect for a successful movie in the U.S. in previous to COVID would be a 70 million or 90 million opening weekend.
Well, if you enjoyed The Matrix, I tend to think you would definitely enjoy this movie.
Check it out.
I would recommend seeing it in theaters over HBO Max, though, because my experience with HBO Max was just absolutely awful. Thankfully, this is the last time they're simultaneously releasing to that terrible platform. But we're out of time for tonight. Check out The Matrix, and you can join us on our own Matrix server. You can find that at chat.freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step